G'day, Sisters of Slaughter. In this episode, we are pouring a glass of our finest blood in our Hag Queen sippy cups to reveal the blood rites of the Daughters of Khaine. I'm joined by a man with the precision and grace of a witch elf blade, Jael Johnson, who not only has his cake or death, but also does incredibly well at the Las Vegas Open, including taking out top Daughters of Khaine on the ITC season. So I want you all to sharpen your blades, make a burnt offering, and get ready to have your mind razored. Welcome back, Dale. Let's talk about one of my favorite factions, that is Daughters of Khaine.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good because you and I love this, right? Because we have a completely different view of daughters. I am a Morathi simp. You are an anti-Morathi crone. And we are going to have a good time. We are going to talk about one of our favorite factions.
It's going to be a fun experience of loving rivalry.
It's so good. It's so good. You are the other end of the spectrum. What's the I've just had a mind blank for a second of Morathi's the crone. What's her biggest enemy? It's oh my god. It'll come back to me in a second. No. In the old lore, she shows up in the little novella that comes.
Oh, Hellebron.
That's the word I was trying to think of. I'm like, oh, you're like the Hellebron to my Morathi.
Yeah. I'm still hoping one day she's going to turn up. One day.
That'd be sick. That would be sick. Let's talk Daughters in 4th edition. And I'm going to set the scene for a sec because, first off, this is not the first time you've talked to me about Daughters. So, you've got a good history, done incredibly well over a number of seasons. I remember you doing very well last LVO. I think you were running 4 avatars. You've got a long history, and I want to tap into your 4th edition. But I want to set the scene a little here because I was looking at Daughters of Khaine win rate, and I'm like, look, I haven't seen a lot of Daughters for a while. It's not something common that we're seeing. They are one of the worst when it comes to current win percentages. They are at a 44 win percentage according to Wohammer. They're in the bottom 5 when you look at Soulblight, Skaven, Bigwa, and Lumineth. They're all in that very bottom, although Bigwa, to be fair, is a very new faction and a low representation. But then, speaking of low representation, when I look at the number of times Daughters of Khaine is being played at a GT versus like the other factions, they're one of the worst represented. They are actually on par with the Fyreslayers. Yeah. Now, Fyreslayers are super niche. When you compare them to like Cities of Sigmar, there's at least close to 100 extra representations. You go to Stormcast or Slaves to Darkness, they're like 5 times the representation of Daughters. Yeah. And it's not that this faction is bad. In fact, and I wonder, and like we're going to get into this, but like I don't think that 46 or 44% win percentage is a fair representation of where Daughters is at right now. Let's talk about them. What have you found over the last 6 to 7 months of the 4th edition?
So for myself, going into 4th, it was kind of a little bit of a slap. I felt when the index dropped was a little bit of a slap in the face for Daughters, especially for someone like myself who like to run avatars, because avatars went from something that was like, hey, these are actually pretty playable, there's a lot of synergy, to being just trash. They don't get the cover saves anymore for trees. They lost the buffs from the cauldron. We lost all our heal press. You couldn't even heal them anymore. And they just, they gained an extra attack, and yeah, it was a shame. I kind of had to, at the beginning of the season, take a step back and look at how I was playing Daughters. Because you went from being an army where turn 2, turn 3 with Hagnar, you could really step on the gas. You had so many run and charge options. We were like very heavily hitting, your Witch Aelves were on 2s and 3s, your Blood Sisters were on 2s and 2s, with Hagnar by turn 2, 3. And then suddenly all that was taken away. Even now, Blood Sisters are 3 and 4s. A lot changed. And I found with the edition changing to be a lot more about tactics and objectives than it was before, where before you could do a lot more combat, you could kill things quicker, but then you still had tactics to score because Daughter of Khaine had an abundance of pretty easy tactics to score. To now, you've really got to pick and choose what you're using and when. and using your toolbox more other than just, I want to get stuck into your army and fight you. And I find Daughters now, there's two distinct different playstyles where you have the Marathi build, which is still there, but instead of Marathi and just bow snakes, you have to be a lot more of a mixed army. And then you have the Cronin Cauldron build, where you have the either more aggressive, more bodies, or you're more defensive, more tools. So it's kind of like a lot more different flex. And once I got the grasp on the kind of psychology of how the list had changed for me, where before I wanted to get into turn 2, hold you up, ground you down while I'm doing tactics. Now for myself, it's kind of like I'm wanting to avoid you until turn 3 and 4, while being able to like hold you off areas, try and counter some of your tactics, and still be able to score my own. So most other armies around me were like, oh, we're a 1-drop or a 2-drop army. We have 5 units and 2 hammers and yada, yada, yada. And I'm sitting there going, cool, I've got like 3 drops and 12 units. Cool, let's go. So it's definitely an interesting time, especially more recently with like Slaves to Darkness being such a big thing, and Be'lakor. Like at Keiko Death recently, we had like 8 Slaves of Darkness players in a 59 player tournament, and 7 of them had Be'lakor. And for an army where it's like, cool, like my most expensive unit is like 320 points, and if you Dark Master that, I don't care. It's kind of an interesting scenario to be in. But what I'm definitely finding is the army is fun. I am really, and the people that are starting to delve into Daughters of Khaine a little bit more now, starting to get their feet into it and doing their own thing. They seem to be enjoying the army a lot more. It's not as cut and dry as it used to be.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, and I was thinking about Daughters a lot because it was actually an army I was playing very early in 4th, playing with my Marathi, playing with Marathi. I love my Witch Elves. I run, blocks of double-bladed Witch Elves, get like the amount of attacks and, the crit auto wound with that unit is just scary when you start stacking up those buffs and just like 60. I think I remember doing 1 attack and I'm pretty sure I did close to 50 damage, just getting those numbers down, getting a whole bunch of crit auto wounds, the volume of attacks. And I wonder, like, that would have actually been really good against the Nighthawk meta where, high volume would have handled the ethereal.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you make that call out about battle tactics, because like when I think about how I used to score battle tactics, even in 3rd edition, Canary was so important to me, yet some of those rules about not setting up screw me out with both the Canary or even, the Shadow Stalker. When I think about, to your point, you got to hold back a little bit. It's really interesting because we're not that defensive and we are an aggressive army, and there's not a lot of battle tactics that support us. And then I think the battle scrolls came out, and I think Field Sergeant, especially for like my build, which is, heavy Witch Elves, even actually the snake build, you guys have a lot of like, infantry snakes. Like that was a little bit of a game changer because it made us a little faster. It made us a little bit more reliable. And I think we just go into combat, smash face, and score our battle tactics later. Because it's a real confliction I've noticed. It's like, do I go hard early? Do I hold back? And like, where's the balance? And what do I score?
Yeah, for sure. It's a real big difference. The old days when we used to be on 2s and 2s for most stuff, to now suddenly being on 3s and 4s again, and you're not getting those buffs in really until you get your prayers off earlier. So you can go in with multiple things, but then wounding on 4s is harsh for an army that has a most of the time 5-up, 6-up ward. You mess up your dice rolls, they just don't work for you, and then you're out there and you just don't have that grindability like you used to have. And that's the biggest thing is we used to be able to do a 4-up, 5-up ward quite regularly on things. And now that's gone. Most of the time, half our army's on a 5-up, 6-up. Because a lot of people that don't play Daughters might not realize, like the Cauldron buff, for instance, that used to be an 18-inch bubble, and that's 9 now, and it's only on infantry. So it's a big change in terms of what we used to be able to grind through.
Even the Heart of Fury, I know when I was playing with Heart of Fury, I remember reading it for the first time going, oh, this is not as good as it used to be. In fact, this is completely different. Like, I was so disappointed with that particular rule.
Mm-hmm.
But I think to your point, it's just a completely different style that it's taken us a little longer to find the route, not play traditionally like we played in third, because some things are just not gonna work as well. And I think people like yourself are pushing forward. We're getting better results. I think the battle scrolls really helped us as well. But because some armies like my build are higher drops. Like, it's really hard to go 2 drops unless you go the Morathi build, stack it all in. Ultra elite snakes. Because I want to have my Hag Queens, I want to have my High Gladiatrix, I want to have my whole bunch of little infantry heroes, which blows out my drops. But now I get extra boosts.
And I remember the first 6 months of the edition, people were like, oh, you got to be a 1 drop. You got to be a 1 or 2 drop. You got to control the situation. And now it's like, I'm like, look at Cities of Sigmar. They're like usually 5 drops or something because they want those heroes. But yeah, like, I would rather have 3 drops, maybe more, and have that potential of 2 extra traits, like being able to do. So for myself, I usually do like Bodyguard and then anti something, because you get that extra rend versus the thing you need the rend on in your Witch Aelves. Yeah, it's great. I don't see, or like yourself, Field Marshal, if you need that extra movement, like movement 10 snakes with run and charge can be a lot, but even moving 8 Witch Aelves with run and charge, if you get the spell off, is as some people like to catch people off, is you take the Field Sergeant with the Crone, and then you can do a movement 8 in the hero phase. So your enemy goes, oh, I'm gonna take that land over there where you're 5 inches away, and it's like, cool, I'm gonna move this unit of 20 Witch Aelves right on top of that area now. Bring it, yeah, it's definitely interesting with Field Sergeant.
So is it fair to say that the 46% win percentage, or 44, sorry, 46 is Lumineth, 44% win rate is probably not reflective of where Daughters is at right now? I think historically, prior to Battle Scroll, it was absolutely representative. I think now we're much closer probably to the 50% mark. It's just getting the reps in and getting more people attending tournaments with Doc.
And definitely, like, I think the people that are playing Doc right now is you're not getting those people like Gavin Geiger or, Laura Marathi, or people that are like known for playing Daughters of Khaine. A lot of them aren't playing that right now. They're playing different armies. So the people you're getting playing Daughters right now are the few people that have played them for a long time and they've adapted it to themselves. So they're starting to go 3-2-4-1 more often. And then you have the new people just getting into the faction that are like, oh, this is a great time to start on Daughters because, there are low win rates. So the expectation of doing well isn't really there. So a lot of people are like, I'm going to start this army. This is a good time to do it. I'm not going to expect it to do well in a tournament, but I get to learn the army and start building it up. So you're getting this like big balance of people going 3-2-4-1 because they've played it and they've got the reps in and they know how the army's working in a new edition versus the people that are just brand new. But as you said, because there's so few people playing it right now, it's just totally skewing the results. So most of the local ones I've seen, the Daughters of Khaine players are going at least 3-2. Even at LVO, like 4 of us went 4-1. We were so close to each other in terms of points and rankings. It was just whatever your loss was, how many points you came away with that. And in that situation, we had, one of them was a Morathi list, 2 of us with a Chrome list. So the flexibility of play is there. And I find that we do have a good spread of tools now. There's a couple of matchups that can be, depending on which one you're leaning towards in terms of Morathi or the Crone, can be bad matchups for you. But I still find that in those bad matchups, I have the capability to still score tactics with the kind of spread that I'm taking.
Yeah. And as I look at that win percentage and I look at, the performance that's happening right now, I think the message that I'm trying to get out there is I don't think it's as bad as the win percentage says. And I think it's a good time now that the Battle Scroll especially has given you a couple of boosts. we were talking before we started recording. You know, there's been a couple of points discounts on your Canerais. There's been some points discount on some of your Cauldrons. We've had the additions of some of those honor guard rules. So there's been a couple of boosts that it's like, I think it's a good time to revisit Daughters. Thus why we're having this conversation. And I'm going to bring up Dale's list in a minute, and we'll talk a little bit about what Dale learned and why he built his list the way he built it. We do have an alternative build as well. So we can talk a bit about that, and I'll get under the hood around some of the rules. But before I get into that, Dale, I'm going to ask you, question from Discord, is Khorne and Khaine the same god?
So Khorne is the god of battle and bloodshed, while Khaine is the god of murder. So I think they could be seen as quite similar. I always find that funny because, like, isn't it Slaanesh is supposed to be the cult of Slaanesh was the big thing with Dark Elves and Daughters of Khaine and stuff. There's always been that thin line. Daughters are more about murdering you and bathing in your blood, while Khorne are more like skulls. So you can have the skulls, we'll have the blood.
Although to be fair, what was I going to say?
It's also the contrast. You've got Khorne that are like jacked up, roided, muscly people versus Daughters that are like live, thin, stabby people.
Sorry, I'm just having a look at It's going to bring up what I think is the most obvious. I'm going to bring this up so we start off the conversation like this. Anyway, all right. Anyway, anyone look up the Dark Elves Battle Tome or the Army Book from the ye old days, and you will see. I'll bring this up. This is completely unplanned, folks. So
yeah.
I love you. Look at this. Yeah,
the Tina Turner hair.
It's a witch elf. Yeah. Oh, look at that. Yeah. It's the Khorne symbol. Yeah. That's the Khorne symbol. All right, let's talk about your list. All right, let's look at the list.
God, that's all about. Yeah,
I never forget about that little. I love those witch elves. Those witch elves were like, I remember being, playing my Empire, looking at that, going, man, that's just metal. That's just Rockstar.
Yeah.
With the dunce hat as well. But this is your list. You went 4-1 at LVO. So is Daughters of Khaine, Cauldron Guard. You've gone Law of Shadows. We've got the Prayer of Khaines, or Khainite Cult. You've gone the Manifestations of Khaine. You are 3 drops, 2,000 points on the dot. You have Stabatha, the Slaughter Queen on the Cauldron of Blood, General with the Khainite Pendant. You've got the Khainite Shadow Stalkers. You've got the Sisters of Slaughter with Bladed Buckler reinforced. Another unit of Sisters of Slaughter with Bladed Buckler reinforced. You then have another regiment that has Caressa, the Crone Seer, 2 units of Doomfire Warlocks. By the way, what a glow up that unit got. The Witch Aelves with the paired blades reinforced. You then have, how do you pronounce that? Elphaba?
Elphaba from Wicked. Elphaba.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, supposed to be based on Wicked.
Okay.
Have you not seen Wicked yet?
No.
Okay.
No. Not a big movie guy.
Okay.
Who is the Blood Rack Shrine with Zealous Orator. You then have a unit of Canerai Heartrenders and then 2 units of Canerai Life Takers. This is a very mixed arms list and very different to the other list we're going to show, which is just Morathi and Snakes. So a bit more of a toolbox, little less obvious how it works. Talk to me a bit about some of the science and the things that you learned through 4th edition, whether it's through your battles, whether it's through your thinking, whether it's through like the meta. Talk to me.
So what I went for, so first of all, was the sub-faction Cauldron Guard. So I had been umming and ahhing about different things because, Slaughter Troop being to be able to, get that 4 instead of a 1 or something on the charge roll if you want it. The Calibron being able to teleport on a 3+, there's things I'd been thinking about. But my buddy Roman, we've been talking about this, and I have a friend called Eric as well who plays Seraphon, and he's been running the same thing where it's you pick a unit of Croxicars or Saurus Warriors or something, and they do the D3 mortal wound pile-in things. So he convinced me to take this, and I'm glad he did, because Daughters of Khaine in general don't have a huge amount of ways of doing mortal wounds. We've got the Blood Sisters in combat, and that's pretty, and Morathi if you're taking the Shadow Queen. But again, they're crit mortals, so it's not a reliable way of doing mortals. So this gave me a way of being able to do some mortal wounds in my army, and literally everything in the army can do those mortal wounds apart from the Doomfire Warlocks. So the Canary are infantry, the Cauldrons are war machines, and they're the two things that you need to be able to do it. So all your Sisters of Slaughter, your Shadow Stalkers, they're all valid for doing the pick 3 units, pile in and do D3 mortal wounds. So it gives me that flex, and that's every combat phase too. So every combat phase I'm getting to do extra damage if I'm stuck in. So that was nice, like being able to pile in, get that extra movement, do some damage. It really helps, especially versus you seeing more Stormcast right now, Slave to Darkness, and the mortal wounds there are their weakness. The reason I went for, I'm going to go unit by unit, so Regiment 1. The Slaughter Queen and Cauldron of Blood is because I need a Cauldron to work with the Crone. You have to have one for the other to work. It's kind of the tax you have there. The Cauldron I was using the Hag Queen one because I was playing more defensively with this list. But then in the last battle scroll, this went down 30 points. So I switched over to be able to squeeze in more units elsewhere. So I take her. Her special ability is in the combat phase. She can give an infantry unit of elves +1 attack. So, that's useful, especially with how I was kind of playing the list, which we'll kind of come to once I've run through everything. Khainite Pendant, for those people that don't know, is once per game, I can get an additional D6 prayer points. So again, the Cauldron's giving you +1 as well. So what I'm tending to do is turn 1, I'm trying to bank as many points between her and the Crone as I can. Because realistically, I'm wanting to get the higher version of my prayers on turn 2 or 3. The only difference to that is if I think my opponent's going to alpha me, is trying to get the Heart of Khaine up quite early, just because there's some combinations you can do to really mess up people trying to do alpha strikes. Then the 2 units of Sisters of Slaughter, they're native -1 to hit on their War Scroll in combat. In my area, there's a lot of destruction players. But even versus other armies, that -1 to hit mixed with the Crone's ability to turn off command abilities is very good. Your opponent coming in for the alpha strike, you're suddenly -1 to hit and they can't do anything about it. Really useful to do. The Shadow Stalkers are the only unit in the army I'm not 100% on. They're 110 points, so they're pretty cheap in comparison to a lot of other people's flexibility units, and they do give me a teleport. Their shooting did get a buff this edition. It used to be 6-inch for their shooting, but now it went up to 10-inch, I believe. So there's definitely a benefit for them to teleport and shoot now. They're just really useful for if you're, say you're against that Slave to Darkness player who's all hugged up turn 1, or the Stormcast player, and you might not want to burn your attack on 2 fronts straight away, or you don't want to burn your flank straight away. Between them and dropping 1 unit of your Canary down, you can score Reclaim the Realms quite easily, and they're still going to be in pretty much a safe position. Plus, if your enemy wants to divert a unit to go and deal with a 110-point unit in the back corner of their board, by all means go ahead, especially if it's a powerful unit, because you're now taking that out for an extra round. So it's bully on you if you do that for that 110-point unit. The Crone is evident in her abilities. So she dropped some points since the edition came out. She does need the Cauldron for her to really work properly. But she's a, cast 1 priest. She has her own War Scroll prayer, which still can be useful. It doesn't work as well as it used to be, but I've definitely won a game before by using the higher version of the prayer to do D6 mortal wounds to get sank out of combat, so then it could be no longer in a position where the enemy could try and kill it on their turn. The Crone's free ability she still does is every hero phrase you get to roll it, and it affects a friendly non-hero infantry unit in your army within, I think it's wholly within 18. Now they extended the range on it.
Yeah, wholly within 18. Yeah. It used to be 9 or something, wasn't it?
It used to be 9, and it was more flexible. So you could do it on avatars and different things before. Now it's just non-hero infantry. So you've got a bigger range, but you've got less options for it. But in this army, you have a lot of different things you can use it on. So the first one is no command abilities. So if the enemy unit is in combat range of your unit with this ability on, they can't use command abilities. Now this works until the start of your next turn. So technically, in your hero phase and your opponent's hero phase, you can put this on 2 different units if you want to. So you can create this big bubble of no commands, especially how I do mine do defensively with the Sisters of Slaughter. So you're now 2 units potentially with no commands, -1 to hit. Your Doomfire Warlocks, as you said, one of the biggest glow ups I think we got. Going to 3 wounds, being a general wizard, doing manifestations. They're fast. They're a great source of your unlimited spell of run and charge, because we lost it on our units. But having that unlimited on those 2 units is pretty good. I find these units are fantastic for scoring objectives, being screens. They don't die easily. They're on a 5-up, 6-up, but 3 wounds apiece. You know, you can do a lot. And for those that don't know, they in the sub-faction for the Crone, the Army of Renown, they had an ability where if you take the sub-faction, if you roll a 1 to a 3 and a redeploy, you get a 4 if you want it. They got that on their War Scroll now. So being able to push up turn 1 if your opponent gives it to you, and know you have a unit that can pretty much get out of range if they try and do not waver or doing something to try and crush both units, is great. And because you can string them out, they're long, they've got a lot of wounds. If you lose 1 or 2, often you can pull them out of combat and then they're just rallying again and they're a pain for the rest of the game. And especially with that high movement of 14 as well, they can do a lot of cheeky things.
Can I just say they are the MVP? Like when I've played with them, they have been absolute MVP because they're a good wound density, as you've just said. Yeah. They're a wizard. Like you're literally getting a 15 wound wizard for 150 points with movement 14. It's movement 14, right? Yeah, movement 14. Yeah. They've got some cheeky little shooting attacks. They've got some decent, like the cursed scimitars are not too bad. Yeah. Like when you actually look at the overall package, and then to your point, the redeploy, for 150 points, these are pretty good. I found myself getting 2 units as screens, almost to your point, where they can be a seize the center or take the flanks. They can be cheeky, annoying with spells. They can be, chipping away at flanks. I fell in love with Doomfire Warlocks. And by the way, the Crone Seer, I remember, I think when we spoke last, I said to you that I didn't like her because she was a glorified Hag Queen that flies, but her profile didn't match the points. Like she was 300, 350 something. And I'm like, there's no way in hell I'm paying this much for the Crone Seer. At 150 points, I think it's now worth reconsidering because she's good.
Yeah, and it's the fact that her ability works every hero phase. So the other 2 ones we didn't touch on is you can do a move in the hero phase on a friendly infantry unit, or you pick a unit, and if it's contesting an objective, enemy non-hero, non-monsters count as -10 for that objective. So you can do comedy things like, I'm going to put this on my unit of Pfeifer Canary. I know my opponent doesn't have enough CB to countercharge. They've got 5 Varangard on the point or 4 Varangard on the point. I just suddenly go over, I put my 5 Canary on the point with this on. Suddenly you're stealing the point with an 80-point unit from 5-6 Varangard because they're losing that -10. Stuff like that. It's really cheeky what you can do with it. Even ghouls, your opponent's got 40 ghouls on an objective. Great, cool. You've just lost, 10 of that and whatever you're going to kill as well. It really hammers things down a bit, especially because we can get a volume of bodies now for cheap. Like 220 points for 20 Witch Aelves or 20 Sisters of Slaughter is pretty cheap in comparison to what other armies are fielding for the same amount of bodies.
I think what I've learned as well, especially because I play, again, a lot more Witch Aelves and Sisters of Slaughter and Doomfires, they punch up really well for their points. I think the Medusae side is priced quite aggressively. And to be fair, they do a high volume of damage. But when you look at what a Sisters of Slaughter or a Witch Elf can put out, when you look at what the Doomfires bring, they're actually quite fairly priced. In fact, maybe a little underpriced for what they do. So you do get a lot of good value out of some of these units.
Yeah, I find they're we have the weird thing going where I think a lot of our heroes may be slightly overpriced. Like the Cauldrons are overpriced, I feel. Some of the other things. But then because our units are in a way underpriced, especially with the changes in Canary, I'll take that. I'll take more units over heroes any day at the minute. And going on to that is the final regiment is so I used to use the Shadeborn because they were a great little unit. They got legended and changed completely. But then Khaine went to 2 wins each, which we always kind of hoped for. And they're pretty cheap. And they get to use the the army faction ability of once per game for a CP, they can attack twice. So having 3 units that can deep strike, 1 unit that can teleport, it gives me a flexibility, not only for tactics, but being able to drop down and take advantage of people misplaying things. So for instance, that unit of long strikes that they put on a flank thinking nothing can get to it. Suddenly I can have 4 units 9 inches away. The Heartrenders are my sacrifice unit that is going to do their shooting attack, move that D6 inches forward, soak the unleash, the covering fire. And then I've got 3 units, potentially 4 if any of that unit survived, being able to charge into that unit. Usually with +1 to charge on turn 2. So that's, I had this flexibility of even characters like someone put that lone character, being able to drop a unit of Khaine down, the Life Takers, that are 2 attacks, freeze 4s, run 1/1 damage, but being able to strike twice with them, and then having those units be able to do the pile-in D3 mortal wounds. You can guarantee killing that little lone hero that's been left on a flying core, that unit that he's put there to go and do a tactic assign. Suddenly that 80-point unit becomes more of a threat, especially with the D3 mortals added on. So the feel for the last thing is a shrine I should touch on. So there's only 40 points difference between a Bloodwrack Medusa and the Bloodwrack Shrine. And the Bloodwrack Medusa is 6 wounds, the Bloodwrack Shrine's 12 wounds, and it has the ability to do mortal wounds in the hero phase. I had the spare points, and it was either turning some of the Life Takers into Heartrenders or taking this. And because of how I was playing the army, it just gave me another way of, when people are coming into me, being able to do additional mortal wounds. This gives me a bit of flex.
It's wild that for 40 points you get to double your wounds, going from 6 to 12, and then getting a whole bunch of things with it. Like, that's absolutely wild.
Yeah. And it gave me something a bit more survivable. Instead of putting all my eggs into the cauldron with the trait and the artifact, it, gives me that ability to spread it out a little bit. Plus, the shrine still gets to do D3 on a 2+ mortal wounds on the charge too. So you're getting charge D3 mortals, you're getting the hero phase cry D3 mortals, you're getting the Cauldron Guard D3 mortal wounds, you're getting her scream in the shooting phase mortal wounds. So you can actually kind of do quite a funny amount of mortal wounds with that one model too.
But what you lose out is the double fight. So the fight for another unit immediately after this unit fights. But for 40 points, if you have it, I think you take the Bloodwrack Shrine every day of the week if you've got it. You have the bladed impacts. You've got the Bloodwrack Stare for both of them. You get, I think it's great. I think it's really interesting, actually, when you look at this, because this is an army or a list that, on paper, if I kill one of the units, so what? There's no real linchpin here, right? Something drops, you've got double cauldron, so you still can take advantage of the Crone Seer. If you lose a unit of Sisters of Slaughter, cool, you've still got other sources of damage coming out. I've had the pleasure of playing against a few of those Morathi Blood Sister, Blood Stalker lists, and it's very easy. Take out this, then this, then this, chip away 3 wounds at Morathi. All of a sudden the army starts crumbling. You take away your Blood Sisters, you handle the Blood Sisters and just reduce the damage, and just don't get attacked from them first, and then all of a sudden that army starts to crumble very quickly. But with this, you're much more dynamic and you're much more playing the battle tactic game.
So unfortunately, the shrine doesn't work for Crefusar. It's only Cauldrons of Blood. But because the Crone is now only 150, and because I had Zealous Orator, the Cauldron doesn't go down easily to shooting, I found. It can still take a lot of damage, but because it's a 4-up base now, 6-up ward, you make that a 3-up with all-out defense. Even long strikes it'll take like 9 wounds, but then I'm still getting to do rallies on it and things like that. And because again, it will usually survive long enough for what I need it to. If the cauldron does die, now the crone's only 150 points. I still find her useful because she can fly. She's got a high movement. She's still a priest. And she can do a little bit of work in combat. She's not terrible. It's not the end of the world. So if it dies, it's like, fair enough. I did something stupid probably to kill it, or I didn't screen well enough for shooting that they managed to kill it. That's on me. And how I've been playing this sort of army, Dustin, another Daughter of Khaine player who went 4-1 with a similar list. Our lists are very similar. The main difference is he doesn't have the shrine. He doesn't have as many Canary units, but he has another unit of Witch Aelves for redundancy. He plays more aggressive while I play more defensive. So with this army, I'm tending to try and avoid combat as much as I can, turn 1 and 2 if possible. So my opponent often gives me first turn because I'm free drops. They're usually 1 or 2. They want me to move up so they can get in range to come and kill me and do the double turn. I don't move up. I don't need to. I have enough dropping units or units on the flank that I can usually always score, take the flanks, or attack on reclaim the realms, no problem at all. So how I usually play is I play quite bubbled up for the rest of the army, keep all the flying units in the air. The Shadowstalkers sit at the back of the board somewhere, usually close to the Witch Aelves, because the Witch Aelves, again, I don't really want them in combat until turn 2 or 3, when I can buff them to the 9 hells and kill your face. And I goes offensive.
Are you talking Sisters of Slaughter?
No, dude, Witch Aelves. Yeah. So my front is usually, I put a screen of Sisters of Slaughter with the Doomfire Warlocks kind of flanking my sides in a kind of crescent. And then I have the Cauldron right next to them. So I usually take Bodyguard as my first thing. So what I want is my opponent to come into me, hit my front line with something, and have -1 to hit, -1 attack from Bodyguard because they're touching both units, and no commands. Then popping up the heart as well means the -1 to wound on infantry. So suddenly your enemy's alphaing you or coming into your army, and they're -1 to hit, -1 to wound, -1 attack, and no commands, which can really trap people. They're then being hit back by your Sisters of Slaughter, who are anti-infantry base anyway, potentially attacking twice, depending on how many you think you're going to lose, potentially being countercharged by the other unit of Sisters of Slaughter sitting right next to you, and being hit by that Cauldron with the Avatar, because they're probably not getting enough attacks on it to kill it if you're positioning right. And it's got 5 attack space now for the Avatar, so you can still do serious amounts of damage. Touching back to the heart with the Manifestations of Khaine, it's not the best lore for sure. It's cheap casting though for a lot of it. And in this sort of build, having that -1 to wound, a lot of armies don't have the ability to get +1 to wound. And with -1 to hit, -1 to wound, no command abilities, you can really make a mess of some people's plans that are hitting your army expecting to do a lot of damage. They're then taking a lot of damage back. They're getting hit by mortal wounds from the pile-ins. They're getting hit by potentially double attack units. And then it's your turn afterwards to do something back to them. It can be really fun and interesting. And even if they're alphaing you with most of their army, I still have 3 units up in the sky and a unit at the back that can teleport. So it's like, okay, you're alphaing me, but I'm still stealing objectives if you're not a big army. I'm still scoring a tactic or 2 if I need to, things like take the land or, potentially attack on 2 fronts. There's still things I can do with my army being pinned, because especially early days Nighthaunt were very keen on doing that. They were just pinning people turn 1, and then it's like, right, cool. There, you're not getting any tactics turn 1 or 2, or you're not scoring any objectives. But with this, I could do that. And then I still have other things to play with. Like my aim is usually to try and do that and hold you turn 1 or 2, or like try and disengage while building up my prayer abilities. And a lot of the time, I'm banking on rolling Mindrazor as my first spell. Now, historically, you used to do the whole game of like, I'm going to try and outdo your magic. I'm going to try and get Mindrazor off. But with Mindrazor being on an 8 and us not really having a way of getting any pluses to cast apart from a place of power, it's really hard getting that off. So if I'm in a position and I can cast it and it goes off, that's my go time. That's when I'm like, okay, I have prayer points banked up. And for people that don't know the Daughters of Khaine prayer lore, our unlimited spell is Sacrament of Blood for prayers, where you get +1 to your rights, but if you get it off on a 10 or more, you get all the rights in one turn. So you can do really, really silly things on that unit of Witch Aelves, where I'm suddenly with 101 attacks with your Witch Aelves, because you're getting 3 attacks base. I'm getting 1 attack potentially from the Cauldron, from the Slaughter Queen, and I'm potentially getting 1 attack from level 5 of the Sacrament of Blood. 101 attacks, crit 6s auto wound, 2s to hit, 3s to wound, Ren 2 to 3, depending on if I get that additional thing to get the anti-something at damage 2, and they get to attack twice if I've got the CP and they haven't done it yet, and they get the D3 pile-in mortal wounds. So you're suddenly potentially taking 407 damage in one turn from that one unit of Witch Aelves if you've buffed it. It's insane what it can do when the go time happens, because they don't see it happening. They see, oh, it's a 220 point unit of Witch Aelves. That unit of Witch Aelves, I've got the Dream. The Dream is the all the buffs off once, where it's gone into 6 Paladors, took them off, and then declared to strike twice at the beginning, piled in, hit Karazai, took him off. Even with the -1 attack, you're still on 4 attacks per Witch Aelf. And it's just an insane amount. And especially when your opponent's done something like they've done the thing where they've piled into you, even if you fail to charge with the Witch Aelf buffed unit, if it's still your opponent's turn and you've not had another turn, it's still sitting there with Mind Razor on. So if you can countercharge with it, they're just not ready for it. They just don't see that coming into the side of their army and just suddenly doing this explosive amount of damage. And when you add in the no command ability as well on that unit, it can be devastating. The chances of it always happening, it's not 100%, not 80%. But this is what you're kind of banking on. You're playing smart, you're playing defensively, you're trying to still get your tactics, get your objectives. If you go down a point or 2 from objectives turn 1, that's okay. Or turn 2, that's okay. Because you know your army can still score tactics. It's just you're losing on objectives. So I would rather play a bit more defensively, maybe lose a point or 2 on objectives, knowing that I've got a whole game to score all my tactics still, while your opponent is going to run out of steam on tactics before you, because they don't have that flexibility. You're avoiding those combats. They might have even done something like, as I said before, it's like, oh, I'm going to take that land on that thing that's over there. And it's like, cool, well, I'm going to redeploy in the hero phase with the crone. I'm then going to potentially cast run and charge in that unit. And then suddenly it's a counter charge away. So if you do still put your unit there by telepoint or by movement, it's suddenly getting hit by a unit. Even for Seize the Center. Turn 1, a lot of armies go, oh, I'm going to seize the center. That unit at 10 at the front, 20 Sisters Slaughter at the front, that potentially have no commands on them already because you took the turn, you just moved them defensively. They've gone seize the center thinking, oh, what are they going to do? And then you're moving in the hero phase, and then you're countercharging or touching them, and they're, no commands, -1 to hitting combat. They're usually not able to lift the unit of 20 Sisters Slaughter in that situation, and they're failing a tactic. So if you can keep your opponent from successfully passing tactics, or even having them psychologically think, oh crap, if I do that, he's going to do this, or if I do that, he's going to do this, and then maybe misplaying a tactic early, or burning those easy tactics early, knowing that you are not going to have that same problem, you should still be able to, as long as you're smart with your choices, score all your 5 tactics, even if your army's being hammered. Like at LVO, the one game in a situation that was very bad me was against, can't remember his name now. He plays for the Minutemen for Team USA, and he was using Flesh Eater Court's Feck on shifting objectives with Ugeron. Very bad matchup for me. 2 big units of the Cav, Ugeron, like massive big block of ghouls on a free thing map. It was a really bad matchup. I did lose that game, but I scored all my tactics, because even with the situation I was in, I'm still able to do stuff. I'm still holding him up. I'm still scoring. And I probably lost that game because I went into combat a turn early, where if I'd hold back another turn for having that freeze to hit go to a 2+, it would have been better.
I want to just sit in a moment and just want to highlight two probably really critical things that you said as a doc player. My audio is coming through your mic. I don't know what's going on at the moment. Maybe it's a weird thing. Ignore that for a sec. I just heard myself. Two things that I call out really importantly. One, the importance of Mind Razor. And I'm not putting it on like it's the be all or end all, but I've seen so many Daughters of Khaine players where you don't get Mind Razor off and you see them like a deer in headlights. Oh, this was my go turn. I needed that spell to go off. What do I do? And they don't know. They're like, oh, do I go? Do I not go? And they often go and they overcommit and underachieve what they were trying to, where to your point, and probably the other point is the power, and this is what I learned off of Daughters of Khaine very early, the power of holding back. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Yes, you get your sippy cup and you get your ability to run and charge and get into combat early. Great, you can do that. But holding back that extra one turn to get that +1 to hit or +1 to wound or having multiple critical spells or prayers off or getting those ducks all lined up, that was a really valuable lesson to me. And the value I found from my daughters not dying early, because we just get better and better as the game goes.
And that's the big thing, is like we're that army that wants to play 5 turns. Because again, we have the ability and the scope to do the tactics, where a lot of opponents, they want to hit you hard early because they don't know how they're going to score a tactic turn 4 or 5. So especially if you're denying them the ability of easily getting into combat turn 1, they're suddenly, oh, I was going to do not waver, but you're now still 18 inches away from me. Or the one unit I can get into has a 4 up, like if I fail my redeploy on a 1 or 2, I'm still getting a 4. It makes a big difference.
And I reckon you and I both have found this as well, where people see daughters and they think that you're going to charge. They're like, this person's going to be ultra aggressive. They deploy really conservatively. Their whole game plan is this army is going to be in my face. Top of turn 1 or maybe top of turn 2, they're going to go for a double turn. They're going to be ultra aggressive. Actually, that's the worst thing I want to do. I want to hold back just a little. I'm like, cool. Yeah. I'll tippy toe up the board. I'll take the flanks. I'll set up ready to strike like a viper, but I'm not going to go in at you. I'm not going to chase you down and just like, max run, max charge, max. No, it's the last thing I want to do.
Yeah. And again, it's that survivability thing where before we could take a punch a bit more, 4 up, 5 up. There's a lot of time with the -1 damage, especially from the old heart. We could take that. We could do the grind thing. Now we don't have that resilience. We die faster and we're on 3s and 4s turn 1 and 2, unless you use all that attack or unless you're getting that prayer off, is the more you're going in with stuff, your opponent's getting to attack before you get to do your attack. And then you're losing bodies needlessly.
My mentality default is always I'm IDK. I'm waiting for my high tide turn 3. If something happens in the battle where some, to your point, a couple of prayers, a couple of spells, some perfect little moments, the stars align, yeah, I'll press go at turn 2. But usually it's turn 3 that I want to really execute and I want to minimize my losses. I want to make sure I get maximum charges and I have all the buffs ready for turn 3. Yeah. That's my go turn. That is like the safe play.
Yeah. And in that time, you're kind of looking at doing... It's not like you're even avoiding things. You're trying to make them fail tactics, but also let them make a movement mistake where there's that piece that buffs their army that is now in a position where you can get in it and kill it with something, and it's worth that sacrifice. Like it's worth sacrificing a unit of 2 units of Canary or something to kill that Watch Hunter that's suddenly buffing that unit, or that Knight Incanter that is, that one turn you really need Mind Razor to go off and they could auto dispel it. That person's now dead and they don't have that ability anymore. And it's kind of like that toolbox fun thing. And I really enjoy it. It makes your opponent really think about things, and if they're not thinking about the ability to counter their tactics, and if they are in that mindset of you're just going to run at me and try and attack me, then they're deploying defensively, and then they don't know what to do for a turn one tactic because you've not moved up. They've played defensively thinking you're going to be in that position so they can do a do not waver or something easily, or even, attack on two fronts kind of thing. And then suddenly they don't have that option. Then they're suddenly going, what am I doing for a turn one tactic? And then that's when they start making risky plays, and they might overextend or do something to get them into a position to do something. And then you're suddenly, it's like, think about, you've got that one unit on the flank, a unit of Canary flank, and your opponent's like, oh, I'm gonna do not waver him, but then suddenly you're moving them in the hero phase, or making them stat objective suddenly -10. It makes it very different, and it's funny. I agree. It amuses me.
Yeah, look, and I'm going to get to the rules in a second, but I think we've brought to life a lot of Daughters of Khaine in 4th edition, and there's probably a couple of builds, right? You can be the ultra aggressive Morathi, combat snakes, bow snakes, a couple of Canary, some things, right? Like you pick and choose how you build your, you might have a Medusa Iron Scale or whatever, right? And that's cool. Like, it's totally cool. It does its thing. It does its thing very well. When things don't go to plan and your opponent can pick you off, you'll notice that you don't have tools in the toolbox. And that's what I found in the past, where it's great teams list, but when you're at a GT and you've got, the ability to shoot off some of those, put those 3 wounds on Morathi very easily, you're able to handle those snakes and get them into charge before they charge you and avoid the 8+, all of those little things. It's like, right, once those 10 snakes are gone, it's just Morathi and a bunch of bow snakes and some chaff. You run out of battle tactics to score. You don't have tools. You don't have screens. So this is a little bit more complicated. You're playing the battle tactic game, which I absolutely love. You've got tools in the toolbox, and it doesn't matter if you go first or go second, because your Doomfire Warlocks can go take the flanks, and they're fast enough to get into the field, right? One of my favorite little combinations is using the Doomfire Warlocks and then getting a Bloodrack Viper out. So if I really need some extra punch, I've, yes, the Doomfires are okay for 150, but if I need that extra punch, I've now got a Bloodrack Viper supporting them and both going off chasing something. As you said, the deep strike ability, going to reclaim the realms or take their land or go hunt that critical hero, the 3 units of life takers, the heart life renders or the heart takers play a really great role, or while your army advances or, sets up for that critical combat. So for me, this is definitely more of my style. Just Mice and Morathi. I love Morathi still.
Yeah, she's got a lot of play, especially because the Shadow Queen can have the anti ability on her. So she could have that for that Ren 4, I think it is, against the Varangard or something. She's crit mortal wounds. She can still damage a lot of things. It's just, I find, especially in the new edition, the game is very much about objectives and tactics more than just outright killing stuff.
Yeah, but at the same time as well, those deep striking chosen, who's going to go hunt them down? A Shadow Queen. Mega Gargants on the field, who's going to go hunt your Mega Gargants? It's Morathi. I hate playing Morathi with my Gargants. I hate her to death because I'm stuck there like an idiot, all while that bloody what's-its-face, the envenomed tail, is doing near crazy damage, and then Heart Render is taking damage. And I'm sitting there going, 3 wounds. I've got no shooting. I'm just dying. I hate this, but I have to do it. And I can't ignore her because she's super fast. Anyway, we will talk Morathi. We'll talk other things. Yep. Really cool list. Very, very detailed as well. Like our breakdown, we've kind of danced around some of the rules, and that's totally cool because it'll make these things really fast, right? And, all that slaughter, super awesome rule, do you find you use it every, are you, and it's been clarified, right? It's once per battle per unit.
Yeah.
Right.
So every non-hero, because I think it's not hero. I think heroes can use it. It's just every infantry unit.
Yes.
Yeah, can use it. So, and it was FAQ'd that yes, it's once per game per infantry unit. So all your little units where you're in that situation because you do it at the start of combat where I know I'm going to do an amount of damage, but I need to make sure I kill that unit, or I need to overkill it, or I can't leave that unit on 1 wound or 2 wounds because then I'm going to be stuck. You're using it for the cost of 1 CP and you're getting that kill through. Because the last thing you want is to be, you're charging that unit of Witch Aelves into something, needing to wipe it out so you could potentially get the turn next or something and then go in again. And then suddenly you're stuck on that 3 models because you just didn't get the dice through. So even if you're overkilling it, it means you're in that position to still take advantage the next turn if you got a double. Or if you didn't get the double, you could still redeploy or rally or something else. You've just got a bit more flexibility other than, I'm stuck on a one wound model.
Yeah, just quickly looked up the rules, folks. So FAQ, if you've missed it, can I use all-out slaughter ability once per battle with each eligible unit? The answer is yes. This ability is used by the unit, not the player, and it does not have the once per battle army timing. So eligible units can use it once per battle. So yeah, each of your infantry units can use this once per battle. So yeah.
And it's a strikes last as well, so there is that negative thing. And, there are ways that people that like playing snakes because they have an ability where with Strathcoven, they can get if you roll a natural 8, they get the always strikes first, or if they get their ability off, so they can do some janky stuff, which is fun. But yeah, I think it's a good rule, especially since we are glass cannony. It just gives us that ability to have a bit more fun with what we had left.
And I think all the more reason to hold back till you start getting those +1 to hits, +1 to wounds, whatever. Yeah, sure, go into combat where you think you're going to win, but where you're going to really heavily commit, you want to tap into at least Zealot Rage, if not Slaughterer's Wound, as soon as you possibly can, right? Like that's where you get those fail safes that whatever you're going to lift, you're going to lift. Or you just need that incredible volume of damage, like we've talked about from like Sisters of Slaughter or the Blood Sisters.
Even doing the cheeky stuff with the Canary, because they're infantry keyworded, being able to have that unit of 5 Canary with those 11 attacks, getting that strike twice on that little hero, gives you more of a chance of killing it.
Sure, yeah, but I'm more talking about those big, heavy pieces, right? Like. But yes, to your point, yeah, your Heart Renders, even your Shadow Stalkers, if they happen to be able to go in and that cheeky, boom, throw the all-out slaughter down. I think we've talked a lot about the Blood Rites and the importance of the Blood Rites, getting +1 to run, +1 to charge, +1 to hit, +1 to wound, and then +1 attack. That's certainly changed between 3 to 4. That cheeky ward that we used to get no longer exists. Losing Hag definitely does hurt a little bit, manipulating the Blood Rites table, but it does make it very, very clear, right? Where you're going, what you're trying to achieve, and when you might pull the trigger on those critical. Why I said to you, like turn 3 is your go time, unless a couple of things kind of work in your favor.
Yeah, because even getting the base prayer off on turn 3 means you're getting that +1 to wound as well, if you don't get the stacked version. So and because it's your unlimited one in the Crone build, you've got the 2 priests usually, even if not in the Marathi build, they often may have 1 priest just to take advantage of some of the prayers. Like it really helps having +1 to wound, because wounding on 4s is great. Really wonderful.
I'm a little bit sad though that the Hag Queen sippy cup no longer increases a Blood Rites table. I mean, 5-up ward's awesome. 5-up ward is awesome, but I do miss the +1 manipulation. So if I need to go turn and like Marathi, just tap the Blood Rites to turn 3, go hard. But yeah, I do.
Yeah, you used to have a lot more flexibility with stacking the Blood Rites, where that's kind of, you only really have to pray now.
Yeah, you go prayer, you go sippy cup, turn 1, go ultra aggressive with Marathi or something, and then the rest of your army kind of moves forward. Anything else you'd call out on the Blood Rites? I think we've kind of just described it quite in depth.
Yeah, and just they stack, so you get them, as we said before, we want the game to go 5 rounds, because that's when we're getting all our buffs through.
Maybe something we didn't quite call out, but I think is worth calling out, is the value of Headlong Fury, the +1 to your charge. and how beneficial that can be for a countercharge.
Yeah. Countercharge is pretty good because, again, if you still had that Mind Razor off that turn and you killed the thing and, your enemy took the turn and they're not realizing that they have this unit on the flank within countercharge range that has Mind Razor on, it can, make a big effect. And +1 to charge is great.
Yeah. Yeah. And it does mean that, you don't have to use the CP to guarantee yourself the 6-inch charge. Maybe you roll the dice, you're having +1 to the roll. If you have as we said, the honor guard rule, getting the +2 to movement, all of a sudden, you're keeping your CP up your sleeve for other things.
Yeah, I find it's great because it means when you're doing things like taking the flanks with the Doomfire Warlock, you can measure them knowing you're always going to have that +1 for running turn 1 as well. That it makes you less of being in a threat range of your opponent, but you're guaranteed to get across that line if you need to.
Yeah, and then obviously the guaranteed redeploy of 4 just adds even more spice. So those guarantees help you to work out when to commit, what to commit, and even just being very deliberate with the distance between you and your opponent, or like how you want to set up the battle ready for that combat.
Yeah.
I think it is a real dance. That's how I've always played it. Mm. It's like a dance, right? Because I don't want to get too close. I don't want you to charge me.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure that my charges, when I want to pull the trigger, is an easy charge, but not so easy that you can then get into me. So it's really using the speed to dance around the board and pick the right spots to fight.
Yeah. It's like we want to be a surgical blade rather than the beat stick.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Of the formations, how do you see them all? Do you think they are quite even? Do you think there are some that stand out than others? Yes, we've talked about your Cauldron Guard.
Yeah, so I love Cauldron Guard for the style I play. I find I don't see... So Slaughter Troop is if you're going the more aggressive version of the build I've got, because you're usually running 2 units of Witch Aelves and 2 units of Sister Slaughter or something. That's really useful to have because you can guarantee, again, those longer charges that you might need, knowing that one of those dice is going to be a 4, knowing that you're getting the +1 on the charge as well. So you're getting a minimum of a 5 on the charge, 6 minimum if you got to do that.
Yeah.
So having that ability to push out the charge range is good. And Shadow Patrol, I don't see as often because at least it's changed now. When it first came out, is you could do it on multiple units, but if you didn't roll the 3 up, they couldn't move. So you could potentially teleport multiple units, but if you rolled the 1 or 2, then it's look, you're sitting there. Good job. That's great. Very bad decision to do. So this is fairly reliable. I did try it. I just didn't find it worthwhile in comparison to the others. And then Strathcoven again, in the army where you have an Iron Scale and Snakes, you're getting the reroll aura from the Iron Scale. So you're fishing for that 8+ for the strikes first. So then you can go in, you can hit them potentially with their tail attack so they get the strikes last ability, and getting to do 2 activations if you use that CP, because you have the ASF attack, the strikes last, cancelled out by the strikes first, can be devastating. But it depends really on your army composition.
And then you stack it with Morathi with the Fury of the Shadow Queen to get the +1 attack as well. So again, like this is ultra aggressive, building into Medusae and having some Caneri. I mean, the Caneri is nice, but you're not building an army of Caneri. It's mostly your Blood Sisters, having some support Blood Stalkers. But yeah, the trigger on the 8, it's super powerful when it goes off. Or I've actually played an opponent where they rolled a 1 on the Morathi and didn't get the extra attack, and you feel the difference. You feel the difference of not striking first, or not, especially not getting the +1 attack.
Yeah. So it's an interesting, not a guarantee, because I think it's a natural roll of an 8, so you don't get to use the +1 from the rights for it, but it's still an 8 with a potential free reroll from the Iron Scale.
Yeah. I've seen plenty of players hit the charge successfully, but not get the 8, so they go for the reroll.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I think Slaughter Troop and Scathe Coven are definitely probably the top two of the build. The Cauldron Guard is good as well, but it's a very particular play style. Shadow Patrol is the one where I'm like, I don't see any value. Like, unless I'm trying to think of when I would use this.
It could be useful for teleporting that unit of
Blood Sisters.
Yeah, onto like a flank of something to be able to get them in. But again, it's you already have an abundance of deep strike or teleport units in the army if you want them, but are not expensive. That, I don't think I've really seen this being played.
I just don't see why I would need it.
Yeah. Yeah. If it was like a teleport out of combat, then you maybe understand that a bit more, because you might be fishing to tag sign in, you're suddenly able to teleport it out, that you can't do it in combat, so it just kind of loses all tactical kind of play to it. The only thing I can maybe see is like that unit of the Shadow Stalkers.
Yeah. I have one idea, just checking the rules to see if I can cook with them.
Like being able to keep your Shadow Stalkers, sorry, not Shadow Stalkers, your Blood Stalkers at constant range, so they can just keep abusing their shooting without being worried about being tagged in combat. That's kind of the main thing.
The other idea I have, and it's not a very good idea, so don't run it, folks, is your Heart Renders. Your Heart Renders then being able to be within 9, because they've got a 12-inch shooting attack, and then the fight or flight rule to then get them to move 6 after the shot. So maybe you go a bunch of reinforced Heart Renders
with Mind Rays.
Look, you can see I'm struggling. I'm struggling to make this work. There's some play, into your point. The shooty snakes, yes, but like, do you prefer the shooty snakes teleporting or Scathe Coven? I think it's Scathe Coven every day. Like if I'm building around snakes, it's just not as good. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm sorry, Shadow Patrol. I'm sorry, little Malarian teleporty shenanigans.
So I find the traits and the artifacts to be all average. There's no auto take in either side of these. It depends purely on how you play your army. And it's like, I kind of didn't think at first, but then when you look at them, it's like, yeah, there's like none of them that are fantastically great. So Master Poisons is really good depending on what you're playing, because being able to turn off healing, being able to turn off rallying can be good. Say you're playing Trogs, turning off their healing can be great. But you play some armies, it's useless. You've also got to have this on a hero piece that is not grindable or survivable in combat for it to work. So not the best. Bathed in Blood, it has to be in combat at the end of the turn for it to work. So again, it's like, it's great, I get to heal free, but also I now have this key piece in combat. That's not great. Zealous Orator, that's the one I kind of tend to use just because I'm using a lot of volleys. It's just your standard, rally 3 extra dice. It's not perfect, it's not fantastic, but it's useful. It's good at keeping, now you have a lot of long strikes and stuff around, being able to keep the extra wounds back on the cauldron can be useful, or, top up that unit a bit more.
Yeah, as much as I want to say something that isn't Zealous Orator, it's hard. It's a hard slog. Like maybe Bathed in Blood for a cauldron, like a cauldron hero.
Yeah.
Because you want to be impacting, you want to do a bunch of damage. So hopefully don't overkill and then you don't get to reap the reward, because that's the challenge, right? There's an avatar that does some damage. You do the mortals on the impact charge stuff. There's a whole bunch of damage that comes out of the cauldrons. If you kill the unit, then you lose the rule. Yeah. Zealous is definitely the clear winner. Sadly,
but it's still not great. It's a rally 3 extra dice.
Yeah, it's not that great considering that Daughters of Khaine really should be a faction that's built on support heroes. Whether it's your Iron Scale, whether it's your High Gladiatrix, your Hag Queens, like it's definitely forcing you towards more of a Cauldron Morathi build rather than tapping into those minor heroes. And I feel like I'd love to see some more support to these small foot troop heroes.
I would have loved us to have kept the reroll prayer.
Yes. Oh, was that an artifact? Or was that that was a high priestess? That was the high priestess, right? Yes, you're right.
Or something like that scale, yeah. Being able to reroll the prayer, that turn you need to get the extra dice, so you've rolled a 1 turn 1, being able to get the extra would be nice. I'd probably take that over Zealous Orator.
With your artifacts, Crown of Woe isn't too bad, especially if you're putting it onto a cauldron with the big base. I don't probably see as much value in Crown compared to the Khainite or even Sevenfold. Like Sevenfold, I actually don't mind as a guaranteed teleport. What are your thoughts?
So, again, none of them are fantastic. They all have some play. I tend to go for the Khainite Pendant because I'm trying to get a lot of dice to get the higher levels of the prayers. But like the number of times I've rolled a 1 or a 2 and it's just like, oh, well, that's great, cool, great artifact. Sevenfold, you can do some funny stuff if you put that on a YOLO cauldron and your Gits player has deployed his shrine somewhere, or your opponent who has that faction terrain piece that's on a position where you're suddenly able to get closer than 9 inches to it and then be able to charge into it, or that hero that it can then pile into or something, can be really funny. But it's like not great. It's sometimes I could see it used as like maybe a get out of jail free card where you've deployed something badly, or suddenly your opponent's taken into a position where he's coming for your shrine and you're like, okay, in my turn I'm just going to teleport it out to keep him safe because they're not as durable now. But this, again, you can't use it in combat. It's not that wonderful. And I said Crown of Woe, it's very subjective. You've got it. It's 9 inches. If it was a bigger range, I think it would be seen more. But because again, it's that 9 inch within, and you got to have, that means your cauldron's got to be being pushed up or in combat. It's just risky.
Yeah, Khainite Pendant is definitely the clear winner. Although I do see value in Sevenfold Shadow, depending on what your list is, what you need it to do. But I think Khainite Pendants is the easy one.
Yeah.
It's the easy one.
Yep.
All right, that was easy. But
yeah, none of them are great. None of them are like, this is great. This is a thing that makes the faction, or this is a thing that like can change a situation into a better situation. It's like, they're meh. They're there.
And maybe that's one of my disappointments and why we're so reliant on unique heroes like Morathi and or the Crone Seer, is because like the rest of them are just buff pieces outside of like cauldrons. And I can understand why they don't want to give us super powerful artifacts, because a cauldron with a super powerful artifact is probably pointed too aggressively. But if you were to put some of these artifacts in these command trays to be like infantry hero only, give them something sexy, it's only on 5 or 6 wound idiots. Like, who cares?
Usually we'll have a 5 up save as well, or a 6 up ward with 6 wounds, 5 wounds. Yeah, it's like, whatever, bro.
Like, where's the Killy artifact? Where's the Sword of Judgment? Where's we're the Daughters of Khaine, right? We want to combat. Why are these? Where is my combat plus X for a High Gladiatrix or a Medusae Iron Scale? Like, give me, it's not Iron Scale, sorry. Give me something for my.
Yeah, I mean, the old Healy one was every model it killed or something, it got a wound back or something. So you were more promoted for playing aggressive, getting the cauldron in, killing those infantry, because you're going to be getting the healing on as well. So, yeah, none of them, they just don't float my boat. Hopefully, we'll get some better ones in the future. Well, but they're also not the worst either. They're not like they have everything can be playable.
Yeah, agreed. They're not terrible, but it also just plays you into a play style where you're putting a lot of your points into your infantry, and it's either Morathi or no Morathi. It's like you're either going all in on your troops or you're going Morathi and making the most of the remaining points.
Yeah.
Let's talk spells. Steed of Shadows, obviously really good. Doomfire, I love Doomfire with the Doomfire Warlocks.
I just wish it was a couple more inches. That 12 inches, it's not terrible. I just wish it was a little, like 16 inches or something. Like 12 inches can be like a little bit limiting, but yeah, it has play. And especially because it does that 6 mortal wounds to a 20 block, it can be quite good.
See, I'm not so bad with it because turn 1, my Doomfires will cast the snake, Blood Viper, and then turn 2, I'm now within 12 to go Doomfire. That's just how I found it. And then obviously Mind Razor is Mind Razor. Put it on your most buffy troop, Morathi, combat snakes, Witch Elves, Scissors of Slaughter, whatever you think needs to do the most kill, Mind Razor. How do you look at the spells?
I don't like the fact the Mind Razor's an 8 and not a 7. Just again because of our, but I do understand because Morathi has that +1. If it was a 7, it's now a 6. It's like a lot more pivotal change, and I think they all have play. Like having run and charge unlimited is useful. It means we could, and it's still cheap. So even if you're casting it in your opponent's turn, it's a 6. It's not that hard. Doomfire, again, you got a little bit of flex versus some Horde units, but, our army doesn't really have a problem with Horde units because we usually have a lot of attacks, but, it can be useful. Mind Race is a key one. Like, that's always going to be our big spell if we can get it off. But as you said, like, you've got to play Mind Razor thinking you're not going to get it off. It's the, if I get it off, yay. Because again, even the number of times I've got it off and I'm like, I got it off on a 10, yay. And then your opponent rolls an 11 or a 12. So you just have to play in like, if I get it, it's great. If I don't, whatever. I've got a plan not to have it.
You made a really interesting comment that conflicts with the way I think of things, but I think there's definitely some merit in it, right? So I play Morathi. Surprise! Mm-hmm. Morathi Khaine is a triple caster. And you made a comment that was really interesting that you like to cast Mind Razor first because then it sets the tone. If Mind Razor doesn't go off, then you at least know how you want to, maybe play out the rest of the turn and what are the other spells and prayers that are most valuable to you. On the flip side, Morathi is also a triple caster. So unless you are up against like a super wizard hero army, they might not have the 3 unbinds to handle that third cast. So it may safeguard you or it may allow you to get your other spells through because the person is so scared of Mind Razor. So they let Steed of Shadows and Doomfire and Manifestations go. Yeah. But then if it fails, maybe your game plan, or maybe you wish you would have chanted that prayer or casted a different spell or, mirror dance something different. So it's definitely interesting and there's no right or wrong. I actually don't mind your comment about doing Mind Razor first, get it out, and then just see what happens.
For me, it just because I know the chances of me getting Mind Razor off are not high, and if I do get it off, there's hopefully a chance I'm going to actually get it off because there's not many armies with pluses to the spell. So then it just purely becomes that dice roll things of can you roll 9 or more if you get it on 8. And it means I'm not then needlessly wasting my prayer points. So I'm going, okay, I'm going to put the prayer in here, put the prayer in this. Mind Razor, it doesn't go off. Or it's dispelled. But then I've burnt all those prayer points where I could have held them on for another turn and maybe got it the next time. So yeah, it's been an interesting way of trying it because again, I used to usually play that game of trying to get off what I can and then waiting for them to hold on to Mind Razor.
Where I've found I mostly do it is like spell 2. Because then at least spell 3 could be Mirror Dance. Like, oh, you know what? I don't like this situation. I didn't get Mind Razor off. I'm going to move around or do some shenanigans. It gives me an option for 3. And I do notice that opponents will let my first cast go. Like, okay, cool. You haven't done Mind Razor yet. Just go for it. Just have that Blood Viper, have that Steed of Shadows. Just do your thing. I'm clearly focused on Mind Razor, and that's totally cool. Yeah. It's the psychology behind it.
Yeah.
I love messing with people. I'm also a massive shit talker. You ask Madigan at LVO, and the amount of shit I talk out of my mouth as like just banter
Yeah.
The psychology is the absolute, I'm a big fan of it, which then kind of leads into the prayer law. And I think this is really where the secret source of Daughters comes. That's where that I always prioritize having multiple priests rather than multiple wizards.
Yeah, so Sacrament is like our kind of bread and butter big one, being able to up those rights. Again, if you get it off on that 10, having all 5 level of rights in a turn can be huge, especially if you're getting it off with Mind Razor or like the combos. Even if not, like having that Witch Elf block with Rend 1 on the charge, crit auto wounds, potentially an additional Rend versus its chosen target, having an extra +1 to hit, +1 to wound, +1 to charge, +1 attack can be big. Like it's weight of dice kind of thing. Because you're just wanting that volume of buffs to work. So that's why I usually try and bank up my prayer points to try and get that 10 through. Because with the Cauldron, you're getting +1 usually anyway, so it's not too hard. I find Martyr's Sacrifice can be fun because again, if you get it on an 8, for every model you remove, it's 2 dice and mortal wound at a 5+. So if you're doing that kind of castle setup where you're -1 to hit, -1 to wound, -1 attack, no commands, suddenly they're also taking 6s on a save as a mortal wound. Suddenly, if you're removing a model, it's potentially 1 or 2 more mortal wounds on a 5+. It can be a really slap to a face to something that's alpha striking you, and then losing that unit turn 1.
And then you pair it up with, say, for example, your Sisters of Slaughter with the Bucklers.
Yeah.
And then you're doing mortal damage on a save roll of, is it 1 or 6? In addition to then save roll of 6, right? So you do a save roll of 6, mortal back, things die, mortals back. So they trade up incredibly well. And it can be a really good defensive piece, to your point, for those aggressive turn 1. I've lost prio when someone's going to come smash me in the face. Cool. Know that you're going to get a bunch of damage.
Especially for some people that might be a little bit rusty on the rules as well. Remember, even if they have Rend 3, 4, 5, you still get to do your save roll first before you apply the Rend. So you always get that chance at those 6s. And like 6s on mortals versus things like Varangard can really hurt them. Or Chosen or something. You can essentially pop things up.
And Chosen, like they'll do a reinforced unit of Chosen.
Yeah.
That's a lot of damage potentially between the Bladed Bucklers and then Martyr's Sacrifice.
For a cheapish unit.
Yeah, like what, 220 points you're paying for a reinforced unit.
Yeah.
Sisters of Slaughter, Bladed Bucklers. What's a reinforced unit of, not Varangard, Chosen? It's
520 or something?
Yeah, like 500-ish, right? So like half the value, you're trading up incredibly well. The unit's now half injured, and whatever goes in will probably lift it.
Yep. And then the only one I've not used as much is the Covenant of Ironheart. It's not like it doesn't have a place. I think if you use it in combination with things like the Crow's ability for turning off the -10 for control, like being able to add 5 to your unit's control score can be useful on that 8. Being able to negate the control store. So like versus, is it Brutes in Ironjaws that if you're wound 1 or 2 model, you don't get control? Yeah. Being able to counter that is useful to have in your back pocket. It's just not one I've used commonly.
No, not me, because I'm casting the Heart of Fury, or I think I'd rather a 2nd or 3rd Sacrament of Blood. I've only got a certain amount of priests. Yeah. And I think for me, double, triple tapping the Sacrament of Blood is better than a Covenant of Ironheart, unless the situation, is required.
Yeah.
But mostly, it's Sacrament and then Martyr and or Heart of Fury.
Yeah. I think 80% of the time is Sacrament, unless you've already got if you've got the Heart of Fury out. And then the others are, depending the situation, you've got them there. But again, most of the time I'd rather have potentially +1 wound, +1 attack over a 5+ mortal wound or.
Yeah, I agree. Martyr's Sacrifice is a niche piece.
Yeah.
Covenant of the Ironheart is even nicher. Sacrament and Heart are the two just prayers you're tapping into constantly.
Yeah.
You mentioned the you mentioned the manifestation law, and it's a really interesting one, right? Because we've got 2 spells, 1 invocation. If you are playing in for example, a Marathi build, you may not have a priest. So the manifestation law is, do I just want the blood snake, or am I better off having a bunch of other endless spells? On the flip side, if you do have a priest, Heart of Fury is the only real priest thing you can access. There's nothing universal. So, and we've just talked a lot about the Heart of Fury is not that great. Like, it's okay, and defensively it can play nicely to an aggressive castle, but it's not that valuable, I'd found. So I guess
it's only against infantry now.
Yeah,
It doesn't work against anything. It doesn't move. It can be killed. So yeah, it's an interesting piece. And I just said, so like, if you're playing Marathi, I would usually probably sway more towards Primal or Morbid, because you're getting a +1 to cast. So it suddenly means your Morbid conjurations are a lot easier to get off, and there's such a toolbox still, even though they had some hits to them. The reason I still play the Manifestations of Khaine is because in the kind of more defensive build-up I have, because I want the opponents to attack those Sister Slaughter, having that -1 to wound on them is still useful. I've also started finding that the other 2 have got some play. So, for instance, that's not Quicksilver Blade, the Blades of Khaine.
The Blade Wind.
Yeah. Looks potentially hot garbage on paper, because it's like 9 attacks, freeze, Ren 1 damage, crit, 2 hits. But the secret sauce with this is the wording on its ability, where the ability is you pick 1 enemy unit in combat range of it. On a free up, it ignores save modifiers, positive save modifiers. So the interesting side of this, I kind of more found out at LVO, was the wording on Flesh Eater Court's ability to get plus to their save modifiers from, I think it's from one of their calls or ability or something, is it buffs their armor save and ward saves, because it's their save modifier, while this counters that completely. So in those situations where you're against that big block or something, and it's like, oh, I've now got +1 armor save and +1 ward save, this is saves also, so it counters that wording, so they don't get the ward save bonuses.
I have to check the tapes on that one, because I'm reading it, right? It says roll a dice on a 3-up, ignore positive modifiers to save rolls.
Yeah.
Ward's not a save roll.
It's not?
It's a ward. That's what I'm saying. I have to check the tapes.
Oh, yeah. Check. But I think...
Check the tapes.
Yeah.
I don't think that's quite true.
Okay.
But I'd need to look at the wording for all of them to say yay or nay. If in doubt, obviously ask your tournament organizer.
Yeah.
But...
Well, that's the way it was at LVO, because I didn't realize it until I was playing a Flesh Eater Court player, and they were like, oh, this actually counters that. And I was like, well, that's really cool. I had no idea, because beforehand, I pretty much cast it. It wasn't very good. The Bloodwrack Viper as well is an interesting piece too, because it only has 3 attacks. It's 4s and 2s. I think it's only Ren 1, anti-hero, but it's the 3 damage crit mortals. Can be funny on a 4-up armor save, 6-up wall save, 10 wound big pie piece. I very rarely had the ability where it can get the strikes last on sight, because you don't really come across many infantry combat heroes or infantry heroes that it's in a position for. But that 1 or 2 comedy times where you roll 1 to 3 6s on that hit roll, and you're suddenly doing 3 to 9 mortal wounds with this little snake piece is fun. And it's a big piece as well. So I just said you can use it as a defense piece where you can ring your Doomfire Warlocks around it, so it's getting that ability to attack as well. If you're going defensive, can be funny for something that's, it's a stack of wounds on 10 wounds and a 4-up.
Yeah, I really like the Bloodwrack Viper. It's done some really heavy lifting for me. I initially I was underwhelmed by it. I'm like, oh, it doesn't do that the thing that it used to do before. But I actually really enjoyed the large base, the high movement. The combat is nice, and I find it really complementary either to Marathi and having it like a mini Krumspine, or being able to support you on the flanks and be annoying with your Doomfires and attack and actually dealing a whole bunch of extra damage on a flank that maybe they weren't expecting to begin with.
It's also a really cool model.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I just like most of the time it's that and the heart I'm using, but yeah, the big snake can just be fun to put out because your opponent sometimes doesn't know what it does, so they suddenly see this big snake thing and they're thinking, "Oh my god, this is gonna chew up my stuff," and I'm just like, it hits some fours, but that's fine. Just be scared of it, please.
I remember in the last edition, it would like just auto slay models. Like I ate so many blood knights with that old in that the old rule.
Yeah,
it's not.
But I think the big thing with it is it's not a high cast manifestation law. It's not like Morbid where you're looking at 8s for a lot of things and stuff. Most of these are on. I think the Heart's a Prayer of a 4, and the spells are like 6s. I think it's cheap.
Yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad, especially, it's good for if you got Morathi or if you're using is it Medusa? The other Medusa is a wizard.
The Blood Rite Medusa.
The blood rat Medusa, yeah. Or the one on foot, not the Iron Scale, the non-Iron Scale.
Yeah. So I usually do my Doomfire Warlocks are the ones usually trying to do the run and charge prayer or the manifestations, while my Shrine Medusa or Foot Medusa is trying to do your Mind Razor. So she's pretty much there. I'm in the middle of my army trying to get Mind Razor on stuff while the Doomfires could then have fun with some of these other spells.
Cool. All right, that's it. I think for me, I was just thinking like anything else I want to talk about. Not really. Not from the manifestation law. I think it's very clear, right? Do I have priest? If I have priest, manifestation of Khaine. If I don't have priest, how much do I value snake and swords? I think I would not prioritize those. If I only had wizards, I would not take the manifestations of Khaine. I would go to primal, morbid, forbidden power. There's so many things you could possibly tap into. It just depends on.
Yeah. If I have a priest, it's manifestation of Khaine. If I don't have Morathi, it's primal, because again, lower casting. If I have Morathi, I'm a lot more likely to swing towards morbid just because you're getting that +1 to cast.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's your decision point.
Yeah.
One thing that I do want to ask you about, and then when I go to some final Q&A, is this was another list that did incredibly well at LVO. Noah, I think he either was bottom 4-1s or high 3-2s. So apologies, Noah, if I can't remember exactly where you landed in the end.
I think he was 4-1 because there was 3 of us that 4-1'd, and one of them was the Morathi list.
Perfect. Thank you. I couldn't quite recall at 90 minutes into this episode. I'm like, oh, wait, I should write this down. But Noah had a different list. I thought I would at least showcase, for those people who do like Morathi, who don't quite want to have all of the troops. I know that some people don't like the idea of running all of the infantry. So this is an alternative to the build, and you can share your commentary based off experience or your thoughts. No criticism to Noah, like you run the list you want to run. It's more just like constructive while we see what we don't see. So it is a Scathe Coven list, Law of Shadows, Manifestations of Khaine, 1960, 2 drops. Regiment 1 is Morathi with Blood Sisters Reinforced and Blood Sisters Reinforced.
Yeah.
Is that right? That's right, yep.
Yeah.
Shadow, it just looks cheap. I'm like, wait, what?
It's because, he's not taking the shooty snakes. He's just taking 3 units of pure combat snakes.
Yes.
And then he's got the Heart Renders to add some shooting to the list and some movement.
For some reason, I was thinking Blood Sisters were closer to 400. I'm like, this math's right.
Yeah, it's because they used to be like 160 or 180 old days. And then in the newer books, they're 140 for both types. So they dropped a lot.
It's exactly that. I remember them being 180 reinforced with 360. I remember that's burnt into my head. That's why I'm like, wait a second, is this right?
You could also take 15 before, so it was like 480 or something for the 15 models.
Yep. That's probably as well why I remember that. That number's burned into my head. So
this army is going for that thing we touched on, which is the You've got the Iron Scale there with +3 on rallies for your units because they don't usually have musicians, and it's got a teleport ability. So the Iron Scale has that bubble of reroll charges, and you're Strafgoven, so you're going for that 8s on your charges, so you're getting your always strikes first. So the feel of this list, if you're keeping all your blood snakes in that bubble of the Iron Scale, where you're trying to get multiple charges off, trying to get always strikes first off on even if you get it on one unit, you have 3 units there potentially getting the always strikes first to give the enemy that strikes fast ability, or attacking twice with those mortal wounds on crits with the extra attack potentially from Marathi. Marafi's there to hold up, to be your magic support, while the Shadow Queen and her are holding up enemy key units because they just have to grind through her. And that's where the 7-fold Shadow comes useful in this live, because it means you can then place the Iron Scale in that position to make sure your units are within that reroll charge bubble and keep her safe. So yeah, it can be very hitty. I wonder now with the changes of having Field Commander, if having something like that, the Iron Scale in with the General, or so Matthias of Team Canada fame is a very good player in the Pacific Northwest and North America. He is a known name. He's actually just picked up a Daughters of Khaine army. He's taking it after borrowing my Marathi for a while. And he's running a similar list to this. He's got the 2 units of Blood Sisters, but he's got a unit of Shooty Snakes. But he's actually squeezed in the High Gladiatrix into his General's Regiment, knowing it doesn't get the Rend bonus on the unit, but just to get the movement 10 snakes. Because having reroll ability charges for all those units, trying to get the ASF off on the 8 roll, which isn't that hard. You just look at the same for casting Mindrazor on 2 to 3 units. It can be quite brutal and hit you, because not only are you now dealing with Marathi potentially turn 1, turn 2 with running charges, but you've got potentially 2 to 3 units of Blood Sisters striking twice, ASF, mortal wounds on 6s. It can hurt if you're not ready for it.
I'm so glad that you raised the High Gladiatrix, because one of the things that I've fallen in love with of late is I bring a High Gladiatrix who supports Marathi Khaine. Mm-hmm. So she runs as bodyguard, and anything that goes into Marathi, I can use the killing blow. And I've killed so many heroes going in for that killing blow ability. It's not for killing stroke. It's
so much better than it used to be. It used to be terrible, but now it's actually completely different. So yeah, it's interesting. And though her Rend ability only works on AoF units, just having that +2 movement for 100 points. I've even thinking about dropping, the potential of dropping the Shadow Stalkers for 1 as well, just for having that flexibility. Because again, like a movement 8 in your enemy's hero phase with the Crone could be really funny. Yeah.
And the fact that the Gladiatrix doesn't have to be its own regiment, it can join as a Coven matriarch. So you can keep the drops low. She's a great unit. She does well in combat. And that's why I'm like, I wish there was like a decent artifact for her to go fight things. Because, killing stroke is only once per battle. But outside of that, like her melee attacks are decent. 6 attacks, 3s, 4s, Ren, 1 for 2. But like, give me an assassin level type, poisoned dagger that does something a little juicier, like, I don't know.
My hope of beyond hope is this weekend, a certain Black Library Daughters of Khaine hero is coming out, who is kind of Hag Queen, kind of an assassin. I wonder if, even though it's going to be named, I wonder if it might be something fun. Because Kato's quite fun for Soulblight Gravelords.
Yes, I've heard some early speculation. Do not, this is not me leaking anything, but that particular hero hangs out with Gotrek. So I wonder if Gotrek and her are going to become a regiment of renown rather than...
They did So, spoiler warning for people that have not read the book. If you have not read the previous Gotrek books with Malleus, stop listening for 10 seconds. So, in one of the books, she kind of dies, but it looks like she's not died because she now has her own novel, and she's not with Gotrek in that novel. So, maybe there might be a Regiment of Renown in the future that is both of them, with that other Stormcast blokey that was hanging out with them as well, because there was the Stormcast person. So, that would be a fun little, maybe spicy unit with a Stormcast, a Daughter of Khaine, and Gotrek. But yeah, I don't know. I know the model. I get to pick my model up this weekend at Richmond Reroll, but I do not know any of the rules. Have not posted anything yet.
I don't actually know the rules either at this point. We are recording prior to this, so I don't actually know. What I do know is that I am obsessed with my High Gladiatrix. I have two versions of them. One is the official model. The second one is it Lilith? The Dark Eldar.
Yeah.
Dark Eldar. Like, she is a perfect High Gladiatrix, fits Daughters of Khaine, both the thick version and the thin version. If you go metal like I have, or the thick plastic one. Both versions, she's great. So
I use the Morgwaith from the thing. So I cut her spear off and then just put the thing on as well, because again, it's kind of like a fun pose and stuff. But this was before they released the model separate, when it was part of the FOMO box. So yeah, she's definitely gone up from being you probably don't really take her for 100 points to, she's now has some play because she's got that interesting once per game mortal wound ability where she could just outright kill a hero. She can potentially give your infantry elf units +1 rend, but the field sergeant can be really big depending on if you're wanting to play aggressive and try and get in early, or if you're wanting to play that defensive counterplay, because suddenly your elves are movement 8, your snakes are movement 10. You've got a lot more control to be able to move things to further charge distances, have your reroll charge with your +1 to charge and your iron scale for reroll and snakes, or you've got your slaughter troop for that, always getting a 4 with +1 to charge. So you're just getting to mess with people where I'm looking at 9+ charges, knowing I'm probably going to get in, unlike your opponent that wants to get into that closer range. So yeah, it's an interesting time for the High Gladiatrix. Definitely gone up from what she was when she first came out.
And this kind of goes back to everything we said at the top of the show. The 44% win percentage right now, I don't think is a reflection of Daughters of Khaine at tournaments. It's just that we don't have the scale and people committed to it. Like, even if you look at the ELO rankings of on Warhammer, Daughters of Khaine have a very low ELO compared to some of the others. So again, those highly skilled players, the ones that go 5-0 traditionally at tournaments, aren't running Daughters of Khaine. But you said Matthias as an example. I think the trend, I'm predicting this now, the trend, you're going to start seeing more Daughters of Khaine on the table. And I think the next couple of months is more favorable for us. So leading up to the next General's Handbook, I think this is a really good time for you to pick up your faction and run it. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised compared to any of them who didn't pick it up, or maybe played it at the start of 4th and wasn't as big of a fan. It's much more complimentary.
Even like we're potentially looking at another battle scroll in March, because it's that kind of time. Because I think December was the last one, so it might be the last battle scroll before the next handbook. Because we're in that lower win rate, there's more of a chance of us having still some points changes or potential scroll changes, depending on what they do. So at least we're not in that bracket of Varangard, Be'lakor, Chosen right now, where something's probably going to get hit again. We're in that area of, I don't think anything in our army is going to go up. Only things might go down.
Well, that leads me to some of the Discord questions that bring us home. And Hugh from 9 Inch Fails, and this is actually probably a nice segue. In the current state of the army being one of the weakest, what do you think is needed to get them to an average 50%? What would your buffs be? What could be an option to make the army less dicey? Or is it adding new models? I'm going to remove the new models piece, because that's clearly not going to come with the battle scroll. It would have to happen with the battle tome. And we know that Daughters isn't on the upcoming battle tomes according to what GW's shown us. So what type of things would you like to see in Daughters to increase the win percentage?
I would like to see either a little bit more reduction on some of our key hero pieces, like the cauldrons going down a bit more. I think 350 for the Hag Queen, 320 for the Slaughter Queen is too expensive considering how easy they can be picked up in the game currently. 12 wounds and a 4-up, 6-up is not great. Another option could be slightly tweaking the blood shield again, so it doesn't just affect infantry units, it affects everything again. Could be nice. I don't see that being game breaking, but being able to then affect Doomfire Warlock's effect itself might be useful. Other than that, I don't think it needs too much. The army, I think, is in a decent spot. It's just getting people playing the army again, but also understanding that we're not a grind army. We're a more strategic, trying to deny our tactics while doing our tactics, while taking out the key enemy pieces, or fighting the right combats, not just doing wholesale multiple combats everywhere where you're losing units needlessly.
While you were talking, I'm just having a quick look at some of our. Okay, I was just having a look at some of the peers, like you were saying, the discounts on the cauldrons. I'm like, okay, right. What are the other similar units and what are they costed? So I just had a look at Soul Black Gravelords, for example, like your Coven Thrower and your Palanquin and that, and they're all around the 250 mark. I'm looking at the Hurricanum and the Luminarch in cities. The Luminarch's 280. The Hurricanum's probably closer to 300. So I think, but that has a lot of mortal wound potential. So I think, to your point, I think, oh wow, Hurricanum. Oh, that's that. That's too. Oh, geez, Hurricanum with Battle Mage is 240.
Yeah.
So I think it proves your point. Yeah. I think maybe the cauldrons are priced a little too high.
And they used to be 260 or 280.
Yeah.
And they were more durable. And their buffs were bigger, and then they kind of they lost a lot of the bonuses they had, and the avatar got an extra attack, and they went up nearly 100 points. So yeah, I would love to see them come down to maybe even just 300. I think would be a bit more balanced for them, or reduce the Hag Queen one down a bit. Just even the foot heroes, they're around. Apart from the Gladiatrix, you're talking about 140, 150 for your foot 5 wounds, 5-up armor, 6-up ward buff heroes. Having those come down maybe 20 points might help. I would love to see the Crone go to Priest 2. Because again, having the fact she needs the shrine for that ability, I think if you suddenly made her a Priest 2, she may be seen a lot more without cauldrons. Just ignoring the bonus rule and just having a flying Priest 2 hero kicking around.
Yeah, again, it goes back to our last conversation where I said I think what people wanted from the Garcia is a viable centerpiece model that's not Marathi, that is worth the 300 or 400 points. Dial it up. That what we got was a glorified Hag Queen on foot, flying Hag Queen. Right? You're right. I would tend to agree. And actually, I think the Garcia versus the Hag Queen, I think the Hag Queen on foot is 140. Garcia is 150.
Yeah.
So, you can't give it an artifact like the Khainite Pendant, but outside of that, I would love to see it like Priest 2, dial it up a little bit, make it worth 200 points, but make it actually a viable little hero. I think rules wise, they're not too far off. I think it is probably points and list construction. I think my question though is that, I've just talked about how the battle scroll has been so valuable to you guys. What happens in 6 months' time when Field Sergeant disappears? What happens when all this stuff disappears? How does Daughters of Khaine stand on its own? That's a real big question. But we'll deal with that in 6 months' time. By the way, you answered Gumdrop's question around, is the Gladiatrix worth taking for an elf army to give Field Sergeant? And I think the answer is yes. And we've even talked about the benefit of a snake build and potentially having it in there.
Yeah, because 100 points, it's not a huge sink. And even if you're a snake build to get that extra 2-inch movement on all your snakes, taking out the rend ability, still a useful little hero.
Yeah, and as I said, even wonderful, the protector of a little Marathi Kane
Mm-hmm.
that I've really I undervalued. I just did it by happenstance. Like I happened to stand next to Marathi, it worked, and then I took it to other events and did it, and like this works. So it's something that I'm purposely repeating now. I really fell in love with that little accident. KG asking thoughts on the Hag Queen of Cauldron of Blood. I have a lot of fun fielding it so far. You said you used to run it, but then some points discounts for the Sisters of Slaughter Cauldron made you switch it out.
Yeah. I think it purely comes down to your playstyle. You either want the durability of the 5-up ward, or you want the extra attack. I mainly did it because I wanted the cheaper points, because it could put points elsewhere. But I found that having that +1 attack can be really interesting with the strikes twice, with the alpha. It's the punishing thing. So your opponent alpha strikes you, they hit the perfect thing of -1 to hit, -1 to wound, -1 armor, attack, no commands. So they're hitting you. They've not done as much damage back. You got the Slaughter Queen off as well. So those Sisters of Slaughter are suddenly 3 attacks each, anti-infantry, strikes twice if you want to do it. So they've gone from a position of, I'm going to alpha you, I'm going to hit you, I'm going to do you some damage or pin you, to, I've just alphaed you, you've lost 4 models, I've lost my unit. And it's now your opponent, my turn to do stuff, and I'm not pinned. It's fun. I found it more fun than having the 5-up ward.
Yeah, I toss between the two. I really do. I think the Slaughter Queen on Cauldron, I do like the Orgy of Slaughter. Yeah, it's hard.
It's kind of good for keeping the Cauldron alive, just putting the 5-up ward on itself. If you want to push more with that unit with the prayer buffs on, they've got Mind Razor off. Suddenly, if they're pushing out of your defensive bubble a bit, that's fine, because you've got that 5-up ward maybe to kind of keep them alive on. So yeah, it depends on your playstyle.
I think what I learned from playing with the Hag Queen on the Cauldron is I can be more aggressive in combat with it, and like go in and charge, and knowing the 5-up ward's going to keep me around longer. So in the past, I've been a bit too conservative, like a Hurricanum in the backfield, Wizard Wagon, try to avoid combat. But this, I'm like, no, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do combat. Right. It's going to be aggressive, and the 5-up ward is kept be aggressive.
Especially if you take that heal free trait, because then you're a 4-up, 5-up, heal free, potentially free up armor, save ET, all up defense. It means you're more of a grindy model than a one punch.
Jolek's asking, is Marathi still a big thing in Doc? It seems easier to kill her in turn 2, turn 3. I have my thoughts. What do you think?
I mean, so it's kind of interesting. So I used to think that Marathi is a bad matchup into Be'lakor Slaves of Darkness, because they can Dark Master the Shadow Queen, which can really mess you up. However, as it's been pointed out to me, and I kind of do understand, is having the Shadow Queen, or even Marathi herself, be able to go into that unit of Chosen or the unit of Varangard and hold them up, so you could then do other stuff. So even if the Shadow Queen is Dark Mastered, the little Marathi can still go in, do some damage, especially if she buffs herself, and be able to get some worth while holding up that unit of Varangard or that user of Chosen, so the rest of your army can then go after the other threat. So I think she does have play, especially right now. You say, yes, you can do that chip 3 wounds every turn and kill her off. That is true. Mid to high level players will still find a way of dealing with her. However, look at the meta right now. It's very mixed. There's a lot of Slaves of Darkness around. There's a lot of Stormcast around, but a lot of them are going more combat heavy builds. They still have the long strikes, but that's always going to be a threat anyway. So I think both sides of the army currently in the edition, depending on how you play them, are good. Like, just because I'm not the biggest fan of using Marathi, I think she's still very viable.
So I have to respond. So I'm a big Morathi fan. I'm a big Morathi player. I have played Morathi in previous editions, and I play her still to this day. She is not auto-include. She is not Be'lakor. She is not Krondys. She is not the guaranteed you must start all list with Morathi. But she does add something very unique and a problem that a lot of players don't know how to handle. And to your point, Dale, she's a great hunter of the things that you want to protect. You know, the Varangard, the Paladors, the 40 Crypt Ghouls, the thing that is like the one killy unit, the Mega Gargant, whatever it is, you can go hunt that down and protect the rest of your army. There is a real balance, and this is not to big note myself, but I don't think I've ever lost Morathi until Battle Round 4. I don't think I've ever lost Morathi in turn 3. And it's because you've got to learn how to protect her. And even if you protect her with 1 wound, right? If you can only take 2 wounds in this turn, that gives you 1 extra whole turn with her on 1 health, knowing that you've got 3 only every turn, right? So protecting her and not being super aggressive, understanding threat ranges and deliberately measuring, like, right, this shooting unit has this move plus this shooting range. So I deliberately measure that she never reaches that arc. Yeah. And then when I'm ready to strike, use that movement, use those pluses to charge and move and things like that to get in when I want to get in.
And don't use Places of Power.
Well, don't start me on that. I did 3 mortals to her on my very first Age of Sigmar game with 3 Places of Power. Never again. Yeah. But my point is I think a lot of it comes to the players, how they use Morathi rather than Morathi herself. You think because she's close to 800 points, you need to get value out of her from the get-go. And that is like the furthest from the truth. So for me, hold back, find the right position, and she'll trade so well. And she'll throw off your opponent because they'll go chase Morathi. And that's while the rest of your army goes, untouched because everyone's trying to go deal with Morathi.
And because she doesn't bracket either, keeping her more alive for that turn 3-4, she has a lot more viability then than just YOLOing turn 1, turn 2, and being stuck in.
Unless you need to, unless turn 1, your opponent's gone super aggressive and you've got a YOLO.
Well, I mean, it's the comedy thing of if you've got the priest in there where you get Sacrament on her and Mindraiser on her, and because she's in the general's regiment but not the general, she can have the chosen potentially target. So you could have Ren 4, Ren 5 potentially with 8, 9 attacks with Heart Render. It's brutal what you can do.
Be deliberate is my trick, but I'd also she doesn't have to be in your list.
Yeah.
Or a couple of other questions. Do you think, these are coming from Memi, do you think that we'll ever get rid of the Khaine tax?
I think that you have the option. You don't have to have them. I find they're better now because they're cheaper, they're 2 wounds, they have a fair amount of attacks, and they have different abilities. But you don't, because there's other cool stuff in the army now, like Doomfire Warlocks have a place where before they were trash. You've got everything in the army is playable. You don't need them. It's purely how you want to play your army.
Yeah, I think Doomfire Warlocks glowing up, but also Shadow Stalkers points going down because they used to be quite expensive, close to 200. Because of those 2 things, you could equally take 1 or 2 units of Shadow Stalkers. You could take 1 or 2 units of Doomfires. They are your battle tactic scorers, and how you score your battle tactics is up to you. Whether it's Doomfires, whether it's Khaine, whether it's your Shadow Stalkers or something else. I think the price points right now are very generous for Khaine, so I don't see them as a tax. But for someone who just doesn't like the models and just feels like they have to use it, I'd be looking at Doomfires and or Shadow Stalkers instead.
Yeah.
Johnny Vampire asking, how viable do you think a mixed arms list would be, both Snake and Elf?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen both. I've seen Morathi taking Witch Aelves and Sisters Slaughterers. I've seen Cauldron Crone list with that still regiment with Iron Scale or a Medusa taking 1 or 2 units of Blood Sisters or 110 of each. Like, everything's playable. You might not get the mix of buffs on everything, but because I feel our core units are priced to a point where everything is viable and competitive, then it's not as much of a threat. It's purely which heroes you're wanting to try and take and shoehorn in. I actually think it's better now that you kind of want to have more drops on your opponent to take advantage of the additional trait. It's worth having more. I still think like fun couple of like MSU units of snakes could be, interesting in a list too. Like, 2 units of combat ones and a shooting one, because then you've got 2 units that are potentially doing a strike's last ability on your opponent. So then your big units of Witch Elves and stuff can get their attacks in first. Yeah, I think there's nothing stopping you from doing mixed arms right now.
No, I think Daughters of Khaine plays better though as a pure force or like a very like 80% kind of force, but nothing's stopping you. It's just because I think some things are really expensive it's hard to do the list.
It's the hero type swings, because those heroes are more expensive than others. So like your Iron Scale and your Blood Rites Medusa are like 160s. It can take that interest of wanting to try and squeeze that extra little, one unit in. This takes that away.
It makes it hard, which kind of leads me to another question I think is a similar answer. So Bloodthirsty Raccoon saying, are there any regiments of renown that Daughters of Khaine benefit from that are worth looking into?
So like Callus and Toll, obviously very, very, they do what Daughters of Khaine don't do, which is the durable unit on an objective. Like they've got the high armor save, high ward save for that unit. They can come in. Very, very good unit. But there are a couple of different ones people have looked at. Like I've looked at the idea of maybe running the dragons as giving me like an alternative to Marathi, like having the 2 dragons being able to like have 1 on each flank or something, or give you that ability to be flexible. I've not done it yet just because I don't necessarily have the models, but and I'm having fun with what I'm doing. Outside of that, I'm not really sure. I think Callus and Toll is like the best option that we have.
Black Talons
Black Talons are very fun and amusing. I'm surprised Callus and Toll didn't go up more in points and maybe Black Talons down. I actually just got my Black Talons painted because again, gives you another wizard, gives you a very hitty hero that can teleport. I did run Black Talons once in a list against Skaven, which was so much fun because I just pushed that unit forwards and just kept casting the 6s only hit, and you're using the Black Talons to literally be there for covering fire. So then your precious Witch Elves and stuff that can get hurt by that is suddenly like, oh, well, you can shoot the Black Talons if you want. They're on a 3-up, 5-up ward, and you're only hitting them on 6s. Go for it. Yeah.
Gumdrop asking a question about Mindrazor. Now, look, we're not the TOs. This is, you've got to talk to your TO with this particular answer. But there's been some debate or some confusion with how Mindrazor works in regards to the +1 damage carrying through till your next turn, right? Now, our experience, both for tournaments that run and our perception, is it only lasts on the turn that you charged. So while the spell might go off and stay on, and unless you countercharge or you charge in your opponent's turn, you're only going to get the benefit in your turn. So it's not like you charge at the top of the turn, you retain the +1 damage in your opponent's turn when you didn't charge, then you get doubled and you get to retain it again because you didn't charge. It's in the charge you turn. But if you then go charge again because you lifted the unit and countercharged, then you'll get it again. That's our ruling. That's how we're seeing it across the board. It's not the official ruling. Games Workshop hasn't made an official announcement, but rules as written, that's what you will likely see. But go talk to your tournament organizer. Dale, any thoughts on that one?
I just think it's very awkwardly written, and I understand how they've written it with the intent of being understandable of you always get the rend, but if you charge, you get the damage. With the first part being until your next turn. But yeah, it's just I would kind of like it, but then I also think, we kind of touched base on this earlier, where I think it could be in a situation of you having nearly 3 turns if your opponent doubles a +1 rend, +1 damage for not charging just after having that first charge. I find with counter charge, it makes that kind of the sense of the ruling where, you can counter charge on your opponent's turns. So you want to make sure they have that ability to use it that turn. I definitely think if you're not sure, clarify with your TO, but also make sure that they're checking other people and not being caught out, because you don't want to be in an experience. It's kind of like taking the better side of caution. You don't want to go to an event, do well, and everyone's like, well, why are you playing it that way? No one else plays it that way. I would rather look at what the medium is, try and get some information from people and take a general consensus rather than trying to game a system.
Play conservatively rather than trying to force it's I don't think it's ever intended to do that, but I can see where some people think that they would get 3 turns. I think the casting value and all that's it's no. Two kind of questions, but both living in the future. So I'll start with Dan O'Day saying, when is Doc getting terrain? We assume it's going to come with the battle tome. Seems like everyone gets terrain.
Yeah,
manifestations. We've already got manifestations, so there's a good prediction that Doc would get terrain. What do you think the Doc terrain would look like?
I think it's going to be either a bigger sort of cauldron piece, because the cauldron, Daughters of Khaine cauldron is such a big thing in the lore of the game. They bathe in the blood, the Hag Queens bathe in the blood and stuff. And you look at the Cauldron of Blood on the Cauldron of Blood model, and it's this little bitty tiny hot tub. I could see us maybe getting some sort of like blood altar or something, which maybe does something to help either enhance us getting our Blood Rites faster, or maybe gives you alternative options. Remember the old the Anvil of Doom from Warhammer Fantasy Battle? Maybe something similar to that, where it's like a sacrificial altar or something, and it can hand out buffs to your Daughters of Khaine units. That's how I think it might go.
Yeah, I agree. In theory, I agree with you. I think it's some type of blood thing, and obviously the blood cauldrons all lead into Hagnar, which ultimately goes into the big bath. I wonder if it's like Lumineth's shrine almost, where it's like like some type of, you're right, like it's probably not like a skull altar like in Khorne, but it's it's not like a charnel throne, but it's something like that where it is very blood orientated. It does probably like more pit or more pot gives a whole bunch of buffs within a radius, or maybe it's like the more pit where if you're in a certain radius, if you take damage, it does things. I don't know.
Yeah, and I can imagine it maybe moving like the Lumineth one, just because the army is supposed to be like mobile. Give us the 40k avatar. Make that our shrine. Give us. We have this big avatar, and it just doesn't move, but it does buffs. But it's a really cool model. So, yeah.
Well, that leads me to the last question from John Reddington. So again, looking into the future, what do you think from like a new unit perspective, right? So we've already talked about the terrain, so I'm going to skip that part, John. But you did ask, are we going to get cavalry troops? Like, are we going to get new models? Like, what would your honest feel, or what would you want to see from future Doc in the Battletome?
So a long time ago, I thought we might get some sort of like snake monstrous cavalry. I don't think that's going to happen. The Games Workshop seem to be moving away from monstrous cavalry in a lot of ways. Like, we haven't had that many new monstrous cavalry. Like, you've had the big pigs, but like out of that, there's not been that. We had like the Mournfang, the Blood Crushers, the Griff Riders, and all that have kind of taken more of a back seat in today's gaming. I could see maybe some sort of Canary hero coming down the line, because it's the one field we don't have yet. Maybe, I mean, I would love another infantry unit that this wasn't another version of elves, because all our infantry units are just, outside of snakes, are just Witch Elves of some sort. So the Sister Slaughter Witch Elves, You could do something similar where you could have the gold staffs, because you have the gold staffs on the shrine, the Bloodrock shrine, over daggers. So they could be, again, that's going to be another Witch Elf unit, but then they could be like anti-charge or something, more of a defensive unit. I don't know. It's kind of a weird situation where we're an army of combat female presenting miniatures, apart from, say, the Doomfire Warlocks. And I don't see them leaning towards going towards more things like Doomfire Warlocks. I think they're going to stay towards female presenting miniatures for that sort of army. But I don't know what sort of things you would add other than like a Canary Hero that wasn't an entirely new made up unit. Because like because you already have your shooting snakes and your combat snakes, but then there's nothing really after that. So you could get a heavy infantry unit, but then that's not really in the theme of the army,
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because like if I think about it from like a pure model perspective, you don't have anything on 130 or 160 mil base. You don't have these big monsters or something, right? You also don't really have those 50 or 60 mil bases. You outside of Avatar, you don't have those. What are they called? The bloody Ogroid Theridens, the Troggoths, those big, thick, three model units that just go out and they smash. You don't have either of them. And
I would love the 40k Avatar, obviously. I would love a big, smashy monster, but I don't think we'll ever get that as much as I would love it.
Yeah, and obviously the lore has changed from Khaine to Morathi. She's now a goddess, so we've got an opportunity there. And if Malarian ever rocks up, and they can have a mum and daddy kind of little thing, whatever. And I wonder if some of those ideas are reserved for Malarian's potential return, but we're also waiting for Tyrion. We're also waiting for Wood Elves. We're also waiting for a lot of other things, Chaos Dwarves.
I do wonder if we might get executioners, or new form of executioners in Daughters of Khaine, because the Cities of Sigmar kept Blackguard, they kept the Sorceress, they kept the Dark Riders, the Drakespawn Knights. I would love either maybe one of those bigger monster pieces like the Hydra or the Charybdis to come into maybe Daughters of Khaine accessible, or even some of those units to become accessible. But because executioners were kind of removed and legended, and they're kind of were always seen as maybe a little bit more towards like Hellebrand and that sort of kind of faction, a new version of them aimed at Daughters of Khaine. So they could still be kind of like a male-based unit or even a field-based, but something that's kind of like a heavy weapon, but still fast and striking kind of unit.
And that's probably what I expected from the Crone Seer. Was like, right, you've got this Morathi kind of style of list, but then you've got this non-Morathi, whether it's Hellebrand, whether it's the Crone Seer, who's like a superhero, whether it's Malarian, whatever it is, right? Like there's those people who are not the Witch Elves, Sisters of Slaughter, the Snakes. It's something a little different, and maybe Exiles of Cities or whatever it might be, or a new version of it. Because I don't want more infantry. I don't want more infantry heroes. It's that monster hero, elite infantry.
I think they might upgrade the Cauldron. Because that Cauldron of Blood kit is very old. So because Hellebrand has been teased in some novel things and stuff, you could bring in Hellebrand as a new Cauldron of Blood kit. Could be an option, because if you think about the last kind of updates Daughters of Khaine have had, we had Endless Spells and the High Gladiatrix, and then we had the Crone. But as you said, we've not had any faction terrain. We've not really had any new big units since the first kind of editions of when the newer Daughters of Khaine first came out. So I believe that the next edition of Daughters of Khaine, which will probably be next year, I don't think we'll get it this year, is gonna be more of a release like, say, Iron Jaws maybe have had, not this one, but the time before, or even like Sylvaneth had, where we're gonna get a faction train, I think we will get a hero, but then we might get a big piece or a unit as well. I think we might actually get a couple of things in, unless they're really planning on souping us in with Cities of Sigma Dark Elves, or
I think it'd be the other way around. I think it'd be the other way around. Now that you got Old World Dwarves, you have Old World Empire. I think if anything, the identity of cities is going to be reimagined. You've obviously had the humans redone, but like dwarves and the elves and what that means and where things go. I think big question marks. But I think you'll definitely see a terrain feature in 4th.
Yeah.
I think you might get a couple of things. I wouldn't expect a big version of like Malarian and Hellebrand, but I think definitely you'll get something. You get something like a couple of things, but not huge amount yet. Yeah. I'm just looking for diversity of styles. Like, I don't want to go all in on snakes. I don't want to go all in on witch elves. Like, if possible, give me some diversity. Give me some different ideas of play styles. Like, there's no shooting elves, right? There's no shooting elves in this mix. If I need shooting, I need to go into the Canary or the snakes. My only cav is the Doomfires. Like, what if I don't want a wizard cav? Like, what if I want heavy cav? What if I want something that's light, screenable cav? Like, I don't know. There's a couple of design spaces that are open for us.
I wonder if they would ever bring back Pegasus Riders, but for Daughters of Khaine. Because, originally Marathi used to be on the Pegasus kind of thing. And, Pegasus Riders used to be quite popular in the dark, they used to the heroes mounted on them and stuff like that. You could have that sort of thing back in. But yeah, I don't know if they're gonna now. I think if anything, terrain piece, Canary hero, and then maybe a reimagining of a unit or something.
Yeah, but yeah, I think minimum is like Canary hero and terrain. Actually, terrain is minimum. Yeah. Canary hero would be nice.
Yeah.
Dale, this is awesome. We could keep talking. As you can clearly see, we're both passionate Daughters of Khaine players. I think I will pick up my daughters again after Adepticon. So I'll be playing Sons. It'd be nice to easy to transport, have some lols. And daughters in a really good spot. Generally, I think that, again, the 44 win percentage is underrepresentative of their power level. I think, Dale, you've proven that, yourself and 2 others went 4-1 at a large event. I would expect to see more 4-1s, if not podiums, coming in the future for daughters. I think it's just taking the reins, going and running with them, and I think you're in a good spot. Infantry's back. It's not as heavy cav anymore. I think you've got some points discount, some extra rules. I think this is the best time that daughters are going to have until a battle tome. So make the most of it.
Yeah, I've got an event this weekend, so probably after this episode's out, and I've got another one in April. So hopefully I can do something useful with them. If not, this looks embarrassing. So it depends on when this comes out. Yay.
If not, you and me are back onto catapult gits, running around with our double catapults and shooting people off the board. Actually, that'd be cool. A war machine, Doc war machine. Give me some long range.
Remember the goblin hewer for
yeah.
Imagine a Daughter of Khaine thing like that, where it's just throwing knives or something.
Or what if it was like the flamethrower from dwarves, but with blood, just like a blood gun? Anyway, we're another tangent. Dale, if people want to find you, are you on Blue Sky or Twitter?
Yeah, I'm on Blue Sky and Discord. Yeah, so Discord, you just got Cronehell Darrel. You'll probably find me, or I'm on Discord as well on your things. I used to be on Twitter, but I don't. It's a dumpster fire, so don't use that anymore.
It's a weird place. Mm-hmm. If you want to talk Doc, you've obviously got my Discord. Come check us out. Link is down below. Dale, you're incredible. Thank you so much, everyone. I hope you have learned a few things from Dale's burnt offerings. And I certainly have had my mind raised, and I'm ready to go stab some in the name of Marathi. All right. See you all. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you press like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AoS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a double one on a spellcast.